Hello. What's up, guys? How's it going? We got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of shit going on in the world right now. Let's get to it. Let's talk about fucking Israel right now. Israel is the top of the fucking news board. Israel, Israel, Israel. All right. So, in Israel, there was recently a terrorist attack basically by a group called Hamas. Hamas is a group in Gaza. Gaza is a little section of Palestine that's been, Palestine's it's in Israel, but basically throughout time, the Zionists and the nationalists and the far right people have been basically whittling away the Palestinians' land and taking it over time. And basically, what's left is the West Bank. Um, Basically what's left is the West Bank, which is this right here. This is the West Bank, and Gaza. Gaza's this little strip of land. So back in 1947, they used to all live together. You know what I mean? This was right after World War II. So the British helped settle, helped colonize, helped settle the Jews that were prosecuted in World War II in Palestine. But throughout time, as you can see right here, 1947, the partition plan was this. They were going to divide it up, right? They were going to say, this is for Jews, this is for Palestinians, blah, blah, blah. You guys can live here, have equal land. But as you can see, like, obviously the fucking government in Israel is not following those laws or the rules by the UN. So what's left of Gaza is honestly this little bit right here. This is Gaza right now. And this is where Hamas lives. And this is the West Bank, which is currently being occupied. And that is against international law. And it's a really complicated issue. So there's 2 million people in this little bit of land right here. 2 fucking million. And every day they're being fucking bombarded. And then over here in the West Bank, I don't know how many people there are, but like they're clearly their land is just being colonized. Because settlers can literally, Jewish settlers, Zionists can literally just walk into your house, take your house. If you fight back, they could shoot you. They could shoot you either way, and nothing will ever happen because they're Muslim. So it's like, it's fucking crazy, dude. It's crazy what's going on right now. And these people have been pushed into this little corner right here. And there's a terrorist group that took over in 2006. This terrorist group took over. There were elections. The government there was called Fatah. Basically, Hamas won because Hamas gives social services to people. So they give health care to people. They're like, they protect the people. They're fighting Israel oppression or whatever. You know what I mean? It's Yeah, so they give all the social services, and then Fatah was the government there, but they lost the election because they weren't ready for an election. And Israel and the UN and shit made them have an election at that moment, so their Fatah lost, and Israel won. I mean, not Israel. Hamas won. And that basically made it to where we are now. Fatah, the government, the actual democratic government, lost, and now Hamas is in there, and they're not doing elections anymore. And the last time people voted was 2006, and half of the population is kids. So it's like a really fucked up situation right now, and like Israel is just bombarding the shit out of these people, and it's just like really depressing. Anyways, let's get to the news to see what's going on.
It's about asking the question, why the United States supports Ukraine in fighting what they call occupation, while here they are supporting the occupier who continues to occupy us.
Hello. I do not know how to intro videos that are so depressing, but here we are.
Yeah. I feel
So
the
in this
same way.
video, I'm going to try and break down how this issue of Israel-Palestine is not complicated. It really isn't. I'm going to discuss what's been going on recently. I'm going to show you a surprising video I found surprising from CNN. And there are actually a couple interviews that CNN has been doing that I found surprising in a good way. And I'm also going to, at the end, just show you what ultimately the goal is, hopefully. I'm not sure if it's realistic, but what the goal should be. So over the weekend, Hamas attacked Palestinian or Israelis, took many hostage. In response to that, the Israeli government bombed civilians in Gaza. Gaza is controlled by the Israeli government. They control what goes in and out. Gaza is essentially an open-air prison of 2 million people. Half of them.
Yeah, exactly. So like Israel literally controls the water, the food, all the trade that goes into Gaza, the electricity. And every once in a while they say they mow the lawn. They mow the lawn, which means they bombard Gaza. And so like they just at this point they're just using Hamas as an excuse to bomb in like Gaza. And then when you bomb people, you're radicalizing them. You're making them hate you even more. So like the government of Israel is just breeding terrorism in itself.
Of them are children. The average age is 18 years old because most of them don't live too long. You have dirty water, you have a lack of medicine, a lack of food, and that's controlled by, again, the Israeli apartheid government. Now, you have this is on the 7th, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on Palestinian civilians in Gaza to leave now because the Israeli military is going to turn all Hamas hiding places into rubble, which means we're going to bomb civilians. Now, here's the problem. How do they leave?
Exactly.
They're stuck there. Israel
doesn't
controls who leaves, who goes in.
It's so fucked up. It's so disgusting.
How are they going to leave? The reason they're there is because to begin with, it's because they're stuck there. They can't leave. Israel doesn't let them leave. So this Netanyahu here, he knows what he's doing. He's working on the world's ignorance of what Israel is doing. And you're seeing a lot of that ignorance. I'm seeing a lot of it, both on television, online, on social media. Thankfully, there have been some voices breaking through, and I'm going to get to some of that in a bit here. Yanis Varoufakis on Twitter, writing the path to ending the tragic loss of innocent lives, both Palestinian and Israeli, begins with one crucial first step: the end of the Israeli occupation and apartheid. So I should be clear. I don't want to see any civilian, Israeli, Palestinian, I don't want to see any civilian hurt or killed.
No, we need to end this shit.
Most
now.
people, I think,
Raw.
I would hope want that.
This is not.
But in terms of who holds the power, what is the root cause of all of this? Who has the actual ability to end the suffering? That is the Israeli government that has all the power, in conjunction with Western powers like the US, Canada, the UK, that help to enable what Israel is doing to Palestinians. They hold the power. They have all the power in the situation. This is, I always think back to, in case you haven't seen, there's this Michael Brooks quote where he discusses how this is not complicated.
It's not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship, period. And just as like a thought experiment, IDW people, if we know that if somehow a population of Jewish refugees ended up in West Bank and Gaza, and an Arabic government in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv had an open-air prison in Jewish Gaza, which they bombed with white phosphorus. They killed civilians indiscriminately, and they had no provisions for medicine They had an embargo that blocked food, that electricity wasn't running, that there was an over 48% unemployment rate, life expectancy and malnutrition statistics were horrifying. One of the major policymakers in this hypothetical Arabic Palestinian state said, we need to put those Jews on a diet. In the West Bank, there was another Jewish area where there was a little bit more autonomy, but there was regular Arabic settlements where they pulled up the Jewish farmers' foods, they terrorized them with rocks, the security forces broke children's bones, and they couldn't drive on their own roads. We'd all have no problem understanding what that was. So there's nothing complex about it. The second part of your question, it's a pure asymmetry relationship. And the question is rights or not. So that's it. It's not complicated.
You have one group holding all the power. They have the ability to end this. If there were equal rights for Palestinians. If there was a one-state solution. Because two-state at this point does not seem plausible. I mean, one state either is also not a simple solution either. But in terms of what the solution is simple. If they were to get to that solution, getting there is a little more complicated because of the power at play here. But the solution is simple. You have here the Israeli government essentially putting their own citizens in danger because they will not allow Palestinians to live free. That is what's going on here. That doesn't absolve Hamas from what they're doing. But when you have people occupied like this for as long as they've been occupied, what do you expect is going to happen?
Yep.
People are going to rise up. There's going to be violence, clearly. And that's what happened. And it's going to continue happening unless Palestinians are able to live free.
Israel's an apartheid state, man.
So I'm going to quote Mehdi Hassan. He also has a clip. Surprisingly, there's been a lot of good. I mean, they've been sporadic. I don't think it's been the 24/7 coverage, but there have been some good pieces on cable news of all places on this. Mehdi Hassan, though, has always been consistent on this. So he writes here, Gaza, in the words of an ex-Israeli intel chief, is an open-air prison, hell on earth, per the UN Secretary General. 2.2 million people, 50% kids, 50% in poverty, 90% without access to clean drinking water. I shared some important background and context on MSNBC. So I'll link to this below because I got a lot more clips to get to. I can't fill this whole video with clips. But this from today.
This fucking asshole.
Israel's defense minister says, quote, I've ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we will act accordingly.
Calling them animals.
Understand, this will have very little impact on Hamas. Hamas, if anyone has power within the Gaza Strip, it's Hamas. They probably have food. They probably have water. They're probably good. This is going to impact Palestinian civilians. And Israel must know this. This is no humane way to act. And I don't even, as terrible and as, fascist oriented the Israeli government is, it's also on their allies. It's also on the US. It's on Canada. It's on the UK that keep enabling this.
They're supporting it, man.
This is why Israel's is able to keep doing this. Is because they have allies around the world that allow them to act this way. Let me first show you this clip. This is Omar Badar on CNN discussing the crisis.
I mean, look, there's all these pronouncements about the need that they're going to do everything they can to avoid civilian casualties. It is really worth emphasizing here that Israel has bombed Gaza many, many times before, and Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and even Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem say that this is not at all what Israel's conduct is. There isn't an effort to minimize civilian casualties.
Yeah,
there is mass indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas. And frankly, we're watching that unfold right now as well.
There's hostages.
The policy is essentially
to
punish the entire Palestinian population, cutting off electricity to all of Gaza, preventing anybody in Gaza from coming in and out. This is an act of collective punishment And this is exactly the trajectory that we unfortunately are on. I think what we're going to see is much greater death.
Yeah, collective
that's going
punishments when you
to cover
punish
the entire
some,
Gaza
like a
Strip.
population
And at
of
the end of
people
it,
for the crime
Palestinians
of
are
their,
going to
of their
remain a
leader.
population that
You
is
can't do
captive and
that to
under
people.
an
That's
illegal
literally a
siege,
crime
as recognized
against
by the
humanity,
UN.
a crime of war.
And we're only setting ourselves up towards another round of this in the future. What we need right now is the world community to come together and start dealing with this issue seriously, understanding that this policy of giving Israel a carte blanche to behave however it wants towards Palestinians is not a way to actually achieve long-lasting peace. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The one thing that has not been tried so far is allowing Palestinians to be free of Israeli occupation and military dictatorship. And until we start taking Palestinian grievances seriously, until Israel starts seeing Palestinians as equal human beings who are deserving of the same human rights and decency and dignity that Israelis enjoy, I'm afraid we're going to be stuck in this situation for a very, very long time.
And that's the situation that they're in. Until that happens, until Palestinians are able to have the same freedoms as Israelis do, then random acts of violence are going to continue happening. Not because it's okay for them to happen, not because it's excusable, but because that is the result of occupation. When you occupy, what, you expect them people just to sit there happily? Like, anyone supporting occupation, you are in support of violence against Israelis. That's the reality. This is a great interview. Great. So I was surprised by how good this was. This is Fareed Zakaria, who is not always great, but this interview is good. The Palestinian View from the West Bank, my conversation with Palestinian activist and legislator Mustafa Barghouti, who is not connected to Hamas, about the terrorist group's offensive in southern Israel. So I'm going to play a lot of this because it's really good, but in 3 different parts since it's 10 minutes long. But let me get to the first bit here.
But I think this situation that has evolved is a direct result of the continuation of the longest occupation in modern history. Israeli occupation of Palestinian land since 1967. This is 56 years of occupation that has transformed into a system of apartheid, a much worse apartheid than what prevailed in South Africa. Yes, maybe Hamas did not recognize Israel, but the PLO did, and the Palestinian Authority did. What did they get? Nothing. Since 2014, the Israeli governments would not even meet with Palestinians. The question here is not about dehumanizing Palestinians as is happening and calling them terrorists. It's about asking the question, why the United States supports Ukraine in fighting what they call occupation, while here they are supporting the occupier who continues to occupy us.
I think this is a great point. Why is it so clear when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, but not clear here? I mean, it's clear to me, but why isn't there just widespread acceptance of, yeah, clearly Israel is oppressing Palestinians. Clearly that has to end. Why isn't that the main conversation? Why do we have to keep fighting back against the propaganda that is in favor of this far right-wing Israeli government?
Like they have a far-right government, so it's even worse. It's like, what?
This issue is incredibly frustrating because it is so clear. Yet so many people are fed propaganda and are very confused at what the reality is. I mean, clearly from what I'm seeing through social media, either people are just bloodthirsty or they simply do not understand that Palestinians are being occupied, that they cannot leave Gaza.
They can't
leave. And that's just Gaza. Forget about,
Israel doesn't let
the other lack of rights that Palestinians have when it comes to Israel, when it comes to the West Bank. I mean, those are other topics we can bring in here. But when it comes to Gaza alone, it's very clear, let alone everything else. Let me get to a little more from this interview.
If that is the analogy you wish to draw, what Hamas is doing is they're targeting Israeli civilians, women, children, grandmothers.
No, they are not.
Is that not a classic terror? Isn't that classic terrorism? They're not fighting the Israeli government. They're fighting ordinary people.
That's one way of putting it, but it's not true. I think Hamas mainly attacked military establishments, military installations. And most of the people they have arrested and taken as war prisoners are military people. I do not accept attacking any civilian. I do not accept that Israelis attack our civilians. But look at what Israeli planes are doing now in Gaza. They are bombarding houses. They're bringing down to earth, and you've shown that on your screen. Whole apartments, whole buildings, high-rise buildings are brought down to the ground, and we already are receiving reports about families who are killed.
Be more precise.
9 people in one family, 10 people in another family, including children. I do not want any civilian to be hurt, neither by Palestinians or by Israelis. But the question is how to end that. Will it end by attacking Gaza Strip another time? Israel has already conducted 5 wars on Gaza. One of them lasted 51 days. They destroyed everything. This did not stop Hamas, did not stop resistance. There is one way to stop any violence, and that is to end the Israeli occupation. And that is for the United States to be fair. They cannot say that Israel has the right to defend itself, but we, the Palestinians, don't have the right to defend ourselves. Let me remind you the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was not only Palestinian, but also an American, a very peaceful journalist. She was shot to death by an Israeli sniper. Was anybody indicted? Was anybody taken to court? No. 52 other journalists were also killed. Our first aid providers are shot at. Our doctors are shot at. This should stop. And the only way to stop it is to tell Israel, you have to respect international law, you have to end this illegal occupation, and accept Palestinians as equal human beings.
That's it.
Yeah, for real.
And for us to see nothing come of the fact that the Israeli government, and this is clear to everyone involved, clear to the US, clear to Canada, clear to everybody, that the Israeli government killed an American journalist. They did that randomly. And nothing came from that. That shows you just how blind, how willfully blind Israel's allies are. And how, again, this is not just on Israel. Because if there was some repercussions there, if there was something that came from that, pulling support away from Israel for doing that, clearly doing that, if there was any repercussions at all, then Israel would maybe feel some pressure and not, again, if that sort of pressure on Israel continued from other governments, then at some point they'd be forced to pull back their oppression of Palestinians. But you're not seeing allies put that option to Israel. You're not seeing any allies try and force Israel's hand into, I don't know, recognizing some human rights of Palestinians. So this is going to continue.
Yep.
This is going to continue as long as Israel is supported by its allies in the ongoing apartheid that they are committing. Last thing here, just to make it very clear, Yanis Varoufakis again, who is fantastic generally and fantastic on this as well. Just a great person to look to follow when any major event is going on. Writing here, apartheid must be smashed and the two-state solution is nearly impossible, even if desirable for a number of reasons. The only realistic, civilized solution is for a single secular state for all, with equal civil liberties independently of religion and ethnicity.
There gotta be a democracy, all
That
religions.
I agree, and I think
Everyone
this
can vote.
is
None of this
clearly
two-state solution bullshit.
how you solve the problem.
None of this two-state solution bullshit or one-state solution bullshit. They need a democracy with everyone allowed, all religions, all ethnicities. Because it seems like at this point, Israel just wants to be a fucking ethno-state. A fucking Jewish ethno-state. And I even read articles that they want to fucking get rid of what was it? A type of, like a different ethnicity Jew. It wasn't the Ashkenazi, it was the other types. Ethiopian. They're trying to get rid of fucking Ethiopian Jewish people by basically giving them, like, prescribing them birth control, and then the women not knowing it, I guess, and they take it. It's really fucked up. But read this shit right here. Look, Netanyahu, money to Hamas, part of strategy to keep Palestinians divided. So basically, what Netanyahu and the far right fascist fucking government wanted to do is fund Hamas through Qatar. They send money to Hamas, and they knew Hamas was a terrorist group, and they knew Hamas was going to use the money in a bad way, and Hamas did. So they send money to Hamas. Hamas grows, gets stronger, better, more guns, more control, and they want that to happen because then they can divide the Palestinian people. Before, the Palestinian people were ruled under a democratic system run by Fatah, right? That's the government, Palestinian Authority or whatever the hell. I don't know what it's called. But then Hamas took over because in Gaza, Fatah couldn't basically give people health care. It couldn't draw people's minds over to them. It couldn't grab people's attention. It couldn't help people enough. And so Hamas won. And they did a coup d'etat, basically. And there's been no voting since. But this has been the plan of the far-right Israeli government. So they know about Hamas and all that. They know where to find Hamas and all the tunnels and all. But they don't. They don't give a fuck. They're just trying to literally genocide the Palestinians. It's so fucking, like, disheartening and sad. Look at this. Times of Israel. And there's several other newspapers and shit. News journalists that cover this. Dozens of security chiefs, Netanyahu directly responsible for harm to security. So basically, a bunch of security chiefs and people that worked with Netanyahu are saying, like, the far right government in Israel is literally making everything worse. They're not helping. They're not helping the situation. They're angering the people of Palestine and West Bank. They're making them more agitated. They're probably helping Hamas again. Here's the map. So here's that map I showed you guys originally. So this was Palestine. You see how they're just literally stealing, like, the land. Like, this was fine. They're sharing it. Equal. But then, like, at some point, it started straying away from that, and it took over this whole chunk. They just sort of sanction off these people into a fucking prison. This is called the largest open air prison in, like, in the world. It's fucking crazy. And you can see right here how there's little sections that are whited out because these are settlements by Israel. Israel's literally just taking fucking, taking houses, taking people's property. They'll just take your house and your settlement and make a little Israeli settlement. And so soon that's going to be gone. All of this right here. And it's just going to be fucking all Israel. And that's what they want. And this also ties into the weird religious people. Like, some people want that to happen because then the end of the world prophecy begins and people and God comes down and the rapture happens and every Christian, it's just really, it's like a lot of dumb shit. It's religious, there's military strategic reasons why we're helping them, and then there's just like presidential voting reasons, like Biden doesn't want to lose all support of the Zionists or whatever. It's fucking crazy and it's really depressing. But let's keep going. I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. All right. Let's continue with the terrible news.
No way out of Gaza. What there's no way out. If there's no water, there is no way.
Remember, guys, they're trapped in Gaza. There's no way out. Israel controls the way out, and they're not letting them out. They give certain people work permits, but that's like 18,000. It's like nothing. And so yeah, they're trapped. No water, no food, no goods, no. You're fucked. You're just literally you're in a literal prison, open air prison.
Way out of Gaza. What should we do? Like drown? Like commit mass suicide? Is this what Israel wants? And we're not going to do that. And I was telling some friend the other day that I'm an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if they charge at us, open door to door to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers, even if that is the last thing that I would be able to do. And this is the feeling of everybody. We are helpless. We have nothing to lose.
You just heard from an academic living in Gaza who explained just how bleak the situation is, and towards the end of the clip there, that loud boom that you heard was actually a missile going off near his home. Now, that man is not a Hamas militant, but many people right now are conflating Hamas with all Palestinians in order to justify the atrocities that are being committed in Gaza right now by this man's government. But as Western governments greenlight an ethnic cleansing and war crimes, everyone just seems to be okay with it. Everybody seems to be turning a blind eye. Media is only showing you one side. They're only showing you the suffering of Israelis, but not Palestinians. And if you're stunned by the brutality of Hamas's attack on innocent Israeli civilians, that is a very normal and human response. It is barbaric and shocking. But anger over that is now being used to justify unfathomable brutality against more innocent civilians who did nothing wrong. Brutality against people in Gaza who had nothing to do with that attack that we saw on Saturday. So I want to show you this side of this story that you're not seeing from media or hearing from politicians, and I want people to understand that fear and anger and ignorance is leading them, it's leading all of us as a society to accept atrocities on a massive, massive scale. For example, a member of Netanyahu's Likud party in the Knesset is calling for a Jericho missile to be used in Gaza, which is a nuclear weapon. Now, this comes after Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, called Palestinians animals and announced that food, water, and electricity will be cut off, which, by the way, is a war crime. But as a result, the Al Mazen Center reports that the Gaza Energy Authority announced that it has run out of fuel, which means that by the time you see this video, Gaza's sole power plant will no longer be in service, meaning that the population is officially in the dark, and that includes hospitals. They will no longer have the power to treat wounded civilians. And this news comes after Defense Minister Gallant announced that the Israeli military intends to commit more war crimes, as the Times of Israel reports, saying, quote, "I have released all the restraints. We have regained control of the area and we are moving to a full offense," with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying he has no intention of negotiating, a comment that received absolutely no pushback by President Biden, by the way. And this comes as the Israeli military spokesperson admits that the goal of their bombing campaign in Gaza is damage, not accuracy, meaning that they're going to kill a lot of innocent civilians. And on top of that, there are reports that Israel is using white phosphorus bombs in the western port of Gaza, which is illegal under the 1980 Geneva Convention since they inflict suffocation and burning on people. Now, showing you a lot of this is against YouTube's terms of use, so I'm restricted in what I can show you. But I do think it's important to understand that the human suffering taking place right now in Gaza is incalculable. It's so utterly shocking that it caused this ambulance driver in Gaza to have a mental breakdown as he witnessed the carnage. he is witnessing men, women, and children die before his very eyes.
He died too.
Our minds
Died
can
like a day after.
barely comprehend that level of pain and suffering. And so when some of us see it, we just shut down, as he did, which is totally understandable. I don't know how I would react if I saw that much suffering. Now, let me remind you, all of this is taking place in what is effectively the world's largest open-air prison. Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas in the entire world, with 2.3 million people packed into 141 square miles, and about half of them are children under the age of 18. There's nowhere for them to go, nowhere to hide. Every single person is feeling the pain of this siege. Now, as evidence of Israeli war crimes continues to rack up, you'd think that there'd be international condemnation or even calls for restraint. And that would indeed be the case if we lived in a sane world. But we don't live in a sane world. And Western leaders aren't just turning a blind eye to Israel's war crimes, they are greenlighting it. Here's what Labor leader Keir Starmer said in response to the collective punishment of Gazans.
I'm very clear. Israel does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation.
You don't need to cut their water or food
obviously,
off. You're
everything should be done within international
the
law.
civilians. You think
but I don't
Hamas have fucking
want to
food,
step
you
away
idiots?
from
You think Hamas
the sort
have
of
water?
core principles that
You're
Israel has a
attacking
right to
civilians.
defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility for these terrorist acts. And I would call on all responsible states, particularly Middle East
This is the same shit
responsible
as the
states,
US
to
government
call this out for what it
fucking
is,
blockading
and
Cuba,
to
doing an
stand
embargo
with the
where they
world in
can't trade, they
condemning,
can't
utterly
order anything, they
condemning
can't
these
bring
actions
in
by
materials
Hamas.
that
The
are
international
needed.
community is condemning the actions taken
Okay,
by
for
Hamas.
the
But as you
government, 'cause the
saw,
government of
he
Cuba,
can't
they don't
condemn
like
the
it.
war
You know what I mean?
crimes.
It's like,
In
get the
fact,
fuck outta
he
here,
said
you
very
pieces of
clearly that
fucking
Israel
shit.
has the right to do war crimes, even though he contradicted himself and said that they should follow international law. A siege is a violation of international law.
You're killing people.
But he
Innocent
can't condemn
people.
it. Now, Biden's administration is no different. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken initially tweeted out support for a ceasefire, then deleted that tweet once he got backlash. Now, Biden himself hasn't condemned Israeli war crimes, and he simply called for a proportionate response while vocalizing unequivocal support for Israel. But that's not to say that Biden doesn't care at all about the suffering of innocent Gazans, because he was merciful enough to at least allow them to be ethnically cleansed in lieu of them dying. For example, TikTok influencer Henry Sisson tweets, "Amazing. President Biden is working on a plan with other countries that would allow civilians to safely leave Gaza and cross the border into Egypt. This is great news. President Biden is making sure that innocent people don't die due to the actions of Hamas."
So basically, President Biden is letting them leave Gaza so that Israel can take it over. Oh, that's so awesome. Beautiful.
That's leadership. Yeah. Now, as Michael Wave correctly points out, this is ethnic cleansing. There is no ability for Palestinians who leave to return. This isn't a good compromise. This is a population transfer. Has everyone lost their minds? And I had the same thought when I read that. Now, Sama Sabawi explains how her grandmother responded to the news, saying, "I told my family in Gaza to get out when I heard reports the U.S. is coordinating a plan to offer safe passage for civilians out of Gaza into Egypt. My auntie said, 'Do you guarantee we would be allowed to return?' I couldn't. I know ethnic cleansing when I see it. She refused to leave. Death or eternal refugeehood. What would you choose?" And therein lies the problem. Rather than using his influence to coordinate a call for an immediate ceasefire by the entire international community, the Biden administration is essentially giving Israel carte blanche to level Gaza. And I need you to understand, the United States government has a lot of power and say here. So every single day that the bombing goes on, it is a choice.
We give Israel like $8 billion. Let me look it up real quick. Let's look up how much money do we give Israel every year, please. Bro, $14 fucking billion. Are you fucking serious? $14 billion and they can't fucking kill Hamas? $14 billion and they can't destroy a little terrorist group? Are you fucking serious? $14 billion and they gotta bombard every fucking building in Gaza and flatten Gaza to the ground, make it a parking lot? Wow. Wow. What a brave, strong military. Ooh. Ooh. Very powerful. It's really
a policy choice made by the Biden administration. Blood is also on his hands. Now, Biden is not an exception to the rule. He is the rule because, like his predecessors and virtually all Western governments, excluding Ireland, well, they don't view Palestinians as human beings. They don't view them as people. Their suffering is never taken into account. Israel always has the right to defend itself, but Palestinians do not, right? Israel needs immediate aid, but Palestinians do not. Israel needs an Iron Dome, but Palestinians do not. And understand that criticizing the actions of the Israeli government is not tantamount to criticizing Israeli citizens or the Jewish people. This is a government that is doing things, and what this government does is not representative of the people that they represent. I think that's really important to say. Now, the Biden administration, in choosing to do nothing, is effectively aiding and abetting a fascist prime minister who is hell-bent on genocide. And demonization and dehumanization of the Palestinian people has been the go-to method of the Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu, and unfortunately, that strategy has been working. He even went so far as to ahistorically claim that Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews because the Muslim Grand Mufti of Jerusalem did. He convinced Hitler to do that. Because remember, Muslims are always the bad guys, and he will go to any length to make them look bad, including even defending Hitler. And also Hamas. But don't take my word for it. Here's what he said about Hamas. Quote, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas, he told a meeting of his Likud party's Knesset members in March of 2019. This is part of our strategy, to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. So this is who Western liberal leaders are agreeing with. A far-right fascist whose goal is to wipe Palestinians off the face of the earth. He's not interested in negotiations or a two-state solution. He is interested in power and domination. And ironically, his rhetoric sounds eerily similar to the far right in the United States. For example, let's hear what Lindsey Graham had to say about Palestine, and in particular, Gaza.
We're in a religious war here. I am with Israel. Do whatever the hell you have to do to defend yourself. Level the place.
It's that simple. Level the place. Wipe 2.3 million people off the map just like that. No problem. Doesn't concern me at all. Just get rid of them. These people are monsters. Now, even though what he's saying there is obviously grotesque, and he's saying the quiet part loud, that sentiment right there is effectively the policy that liberals like Joe Biden and Keir Starmer are adopting. The question is, why? Why do liberal leaders suddenly sound like fascists in the United States when it comes to this issue? And the answer is simple. Follow the money. Organizations like AIPAC and Democratic Majority for Israel spend millions and millions of dollars lobbying politicians every single year at the behest of Israel. In fact, groups like DMFI specifically spend to defeat progressive politicians that advocate for Palestinian human rights. For example, Nina Turner had a 35-point lead over her opponent Chantel Brown, and it looked like victory was inevitable, only to later lose once Israeli interest groups began to spend big to defeat her. Now, to be crystal clear, the Israeli lobby is not lobbying on behalf of the Jewish people or even Israeli citizens. They are lobbying in the interest of the Israeli state, the Israeli government, right? And I think that that distinction is really important to make given the prevalence of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that propagate harmful lies about Jewish people using money to control the media and other institutions. That's wrong, and that lie must be defeated. But what we're talking about here is a government and not people. That distinction matters. And while the Israel lobby is large, it's not even the largest foreign spender in U.S. elections, right? When it comes to foreign lobbying, other countries like China, Qatar, Russia, and Saudi Arabia actually spend more than Israel. So this isn't an Israel problem. This is a money and politics problem in the United States. But if you ever wonder why our lawmakers make puzzling decisions like they support weapon sales to Saudi Arabia, even if they know that those weapons are going to be used on innocent civilians in Yemen, Well, you can thank lobbying for that. Yemen doesn't have a lobby, which is why our politicians are more likely to do what Saudi Arabia wants, right? Yemen can't counter the lobbying that Saudi Arabia does. And the same is true in this instance. Palestinians don't have a lobby that can counter the lobbying that's being done at the behest of Israel. They don't have comparable lobbying power, which is why almost all politicians unequivocally side with Israel no matter what they're doing. It's why we see liberal politicians like Joe Biden and Obama side with the far-right government of Israel when that seems ridiculous. It's why Democrats like Richie Torres attack his own colleagues for condemning Israeli war crimes. I mean, look at his top campaign contributor. It's AIPAC. Always follow the money. But I mean, even if you refuse that money and lobbying, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be indirectly affected by the lobbying of these foreign governments. Because even if you don't take their money, well, if you speak out against them, they can bankroll your opponent and your career like that. Ask Nina Turner how that turns out. Which is why it's so rare to see politicians like Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush who speak out with clarity on this issue. It's why we hear so much thirst for blood. It's because these politicians are corrupt. Now, on the subject of Rashida Tlaib, a Palestinian American, just look at the way that politicians talk about her for simply saying that Palestinians deserve human rights. Now, she put up a flag in support of Palestine because she is a Palestinian. That's not going to change regardless of the circumstances. But pay close attention to what one of her colleagues said about Gaza as he's condemning Tlaib.
Rashida Tlaib has I don't even want to call it the Palestinian flag because they're not a state, they're a territory that's about to probably get eviscerated and go away here shortly, as we're going to turn that into a parking lot.
We're going to turn Palestine into a parking lot. He just said that on national television. All this because his Palestinian colleague displayed a Palestinian flag. Now, on top of that, he also introduced legislation to ban her flag, by the way. But just for fun, let's take a look at who his top contributors are. Oh, look, it's the same organization that donates to Democrats, AIPAC. Therein lies the problem. This is why every politician, regardless of party, sounds the same. They're all taking money from the same interest groups, right? Now, you often hear about college students and journalists being blacklisted because they participate in a peaceful movement against Israeli apartheid, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. But do you think there's going to be any consequences for a sitting congressperson saying that we should turn Gaza into a parking lot? Of course not, because that type of dehumanizing rhetoric is normalized in the United States and, to be fair, in Europe as well, especially in the UK. So this is why we never hear about Palestinian suffering, because American politicians in both parties are paid to be complicit in their suffering and subjugation. And in theory, media could hold them accountable. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to explain this conflict of interest that politicians have and call them out for it. But the problem is they're not doing that because they're complicit and also ignorant to an extent. Take CNN's Wolf Blitzer, for example, who spoke to an American doctor trapped in Gaza currently as they're being bombed. And he seemingly learned for the first time in real time that there's nowhere for citizens to escape when they're being bombed.
You were there on a routine mission, a very important mission to take care of children. Were you prepared at all for this?
Well, whenever you go to Gaza, you always know that there's danger of some violence while you're there. But no, I wasn't prepared for this.
Let us know if you need to go into some sort of a bomb shelter or whatever, because I can hear those explosions going off right near you.
There are no bomb shelters here.
Is there any safe area that you can go to?
Yeah, actually, I have a sister-in-law who's Palestinian. She tells me to stay away from the windows, so I'm away from the window. Stay by corners of walls that are more fortified, and open your mouth so your eardrums don't break if there's a lot of pressure. So I'm following her advice, and I'm in a safe part of the room.
These are the people reporting on this subject, the people supposedly educating us about this conflict. Completely ignorant of the details. And that ignorance is then exploited by Israel in order to cultivate a very narrow view of the entire situation. As Mondoweiss news director Yumna explains, the Israeli military is taking foreign press on tours of sites where Israelis were killed. Israeli media reported that only international outlets have been allowed on these government-sponsored tours. No local media has even been allowed to approach. At the same time, no foreign press are being allowed into Gaza, and so audiences in the West are being fed constant images of their favorite reporters cowering on the ground to take cover from rockets being fired from Gaza. It's why we're seeing countless reports like this one, where journalists are regurgitating lines and talking points fed to them by the Israeli army about decapitated Israeli babies, claims that are going unchecked and unverified. By taking only foreign press into these sites and feeding them info, Israel is again taking control of the narrative on the international stage. Western journalists are more than happy to play along, failing to do basic due diligence in conveying these stories to their audiences. And by not allowing local, Hebrew-speaking media into certain areas, Israel is shielding itself from the criticisms and growing frustrations of a population that could easily eventually turn on the government for failing to protect them. It's a win-win situation for Israel. It gets to put out to the world the images that it wants, dead Israelis, while limiting what it doesn't want the world to see or hear, real-life Gazans as human beings, and preventing its own people from the truth of its colossal failure, right? And it's very difficult to obtain accurate information during times of war because you really don't know what's true and what's false. It takes time to verify these things. It's called the fog of war for a reason. I mean, even a video that you're looking at could be misleading because you could be seeing something that looks legitimate, but it could be old. It could be from an entirely different region of the world. So you've got the fog of war, and on top of that, you have the added issue of this curated one-sided narrative that journalists are accepting from the Israeli government without verifying and fact-checking. And on top of that, you have the additional layer of ignorance from pundits. And if the people in media are ignorant, then the people who are being educated by them are also going to be ignorant. So this is a problem. This is why people are seemingly fine with calls to annihilate Gaza from the face of the world. And Israel wants you to only see Hamas's brutality because they hope that that justifiable anger that you feel when you see it will cultivate support for their barbarity in return. They want you to think that their response is proportionate. It's called manufacturing consent. Now, Cosmic Slop shares how the baby beheading story hasn't been verified, yet it has been reported widely by mainstream media. And also, he points out how the German girl who attended the Israeli music festival during the Hamas attack thought to be dead is actually alive. And in response, Scarlett makes a really good point saying, do any younger folks wonder how the media tricked a bunch of Americans into supporting the Iraq war and more, or does this clear it up? And I think that's a really good point, and it's something that we should all keep in the back of our minds. Odds are, if you're watching this, you're a good person. I think most people are good people. And powerful people are either wittingly or unwittingly exploiting your justifiable sense of outrage over violence to justify genocide and ethnic cleansing. And you can't let fear and emotions persuade you. You have to think clearly and understand that all human life is precious. The lives of Israeli citizens and Palestinians are precious. But the media doesn't want you to think about Palestinian suffering. For example, look at the questions that a BBC reporter asked a Palestinian man who just lost 6 family members. Look at what she continues to focus on as he explains how dire the situation is and the pain he just experienced.
They were just sitting at their home and they were simply bombarded. Their entire building was brought down. My cousin, Aya, her 2 children, her husband, her mother-in-law, and 2 other relatives died immediately, were killed instantly. And 2 of her youngest children, a twin, 2 years old, are now in intensive care. This is truly heartbreaking. And the issue here, Kirsty, is that they have no bunkers, they have no Iron Dome, they have nowhere to go. They are simply sitting ducks for the Israeli war machine.
I'm sorry for your own personal loss. I mean, can I just be clear, though? You cannot condone the killing of civilians in Israel, can you? Nor the kidnapping of families.
No, we don't condone. And we are very clear, Kirsty. We reject any targeting or harming of civilians from all sides. And you are talking to a Palestinian representative, official, the ambassador, that I represent my government, the PLO, the national movement of Palestine, and we have been committed to this for 30 years, not just today or yesterday, for 30 years. Since the signing of the Oslo Accords, we have committed to non-violence. We have committed to negotiations, as you know.
Yes, and
so this is nothing new. That's why this question, we have done everything in our power to find a different path.
But we have a situation now, as you heard there from Mark, that Hamas may be an empty threat, threatening to kill hostages. Do you condemn that kind of action?
Listen, hostages must be protected and must be made safe and kept safe. Absolutely, this has no discussion whatsoever. We must return the moral high ground, and Israel must immediately cease targeting civilians. And by the way, Kirsty, allow me to say this. This is an Israeli military doctrine. They call it the Iron Dome. Whenever there is such an incident, they go after the civilians to pressure the fighters. So you've heard one of the Israeli
Well, we know there's been a lot of strikes
just 2 minutes ago. He wanted to starve the people in Gaza. He wanted to cut electricity and water. These are war crimes, collective punishment.
So there is a possibility that both the UK and the European Commission will cut aid to Palestinians. What's your reaction to that?
That would be very, very counterproductive, and it doesn't serve anything. They will do exactly what is Israel doing. They will do exactly the collective punishment and punishing the people who has nothing to do with this. My cousin is not Hamas. In fact, her husband works for the Palestinian Authority, the opponents of Hamas. These kids, 4 years and 2 years, have nothing to do with Hamas. Everybody, including these silly ideas in the world, are punishing the people that have nothing to do with this.
And we know that children that are young or also have died in Israel. So, in your view, is this a contained but appalling conflict between Hamas and Israel? Or do you think Hamas want to widen the conflagration?
No, it's Israel now that wants to widen the scope. It's Israel.
But Hamas might want this whole area to be destabilized.
Well, Hamas is a militant group. We are the government. Israel has a government. There is the international community. The first and the most important priority now is to stop this madness.
That was so frustrating to watch because like an NPC, she just kept asking the same questions. Yeah, I get that your family's dead, but do you think Hamas is bad or not? When he's explaining, he agrees with her, but she just won't take yes for an answer. And this is a microcosm of a bigger issue that we see with media when it comes to this. They just ignore the suffering of Palestinians. She's literally ignoring the suffering that his family has endured and just continues to ask him about Hamas. Now, in a different interview, he called out this double standard that's all too common with the mainstream media in the West, and I think that what he says here was important.
And the mainstream media, for 75 years, you bring us here whenever there are Israelis who are killed. Did you bring me here when many Palestinians in the West Bank, more than 200 over the last few months? Do you invite me when there is such Israeli provocations in Jerusalem and elsewhere? Because what Israelis have seen, which we started by saying tragic, the last 48 hours, the Palestinians see every day for the last 50 years. You know the situation in Gaza, you've just described it.
And he is absolutely correct. And the reason why there's this callousness here is because Hamas is being conflated with Palestinians, which therefore places blame on Palestinians for all of the actions of Hamas. And that's a really convenient propaganda trick for a number of reasons. First, it justifies atrocities against Palestinians under the pretense that they struck first, for example. And also, anyone who vocalizes support for Palestinians is labeled a terrorist sympathizer because, again, in their eyes, Hamas and Palestinians are synonymous. Now, take Jake Tapper in the U.S., for example, who also promotes the same exact line of thinking.
These last few days have been a real eye-opening period for a lot of people, a lot of Democrats, a lot of progressives, in terms of anti-Semitism on the left. A lot of people who seem more shocked at dehumanizing language used by world leaders to describe Hamas than what Hamas actually perpetrated on Saturday.
Yeah, so throughout this video, I've shown you countless examples of dehumanizing language being used. Did you once get the sense that I'm referring to Hamas? I am talking about Palestinian civilians who have nothing to do with Hamas. Now, you can point to anecdotes that are atrocious. For example, protesters were chanting "gas to Jews" at a pro-Palestinian rally in Sydney. BLM Chicago tweeted out a photograph saying they support Palestine with one of the Hamas paragliders. On top of that, some DSA protesters in Town Square were celebrating Hamas's actions. Now, Jake Tapper is likely using those examples to suggest that the left is anti-Semitic or supports Hamas. But this kind of reprehensible rhetoric is not a unique phenomenon to the left, right? And any leftist who advocates for Palestinian human rights is always asked if they condemn that type of rhetoric or if they condemn Hamas, in the same way that Palestinians are asked if they condemn Hamas as they're explaining the suffering that their family is enduring. But politicians who unequivocally support Israel are never asked to denounce this sort of rhetoric.
Fuck Palestine! Palestine to my dick!
What do you think the response should be from Netanyahu and the military to Gaza?
Kill all Palestinians! All of them! Not one left from the river to the sea. Palestine will be deceased! And Israel need to do like this. You see? Now Gaza. Like this. Gaza need to do like this. Or like this, but all this Jewish. Two options.
What do you think the response should be
to
Gaza?
We gotta wipe them off the fucking map. I'm talking about
every
fucking flatten them like a parking lot.
Yeah,
flatten them out once and for
there's
all.
nothing else you can do. They proved to us that there's nothing else you can do. We tried, and
we tried everything. It doesn't work. We have to wipe them flat off the fucking map, like a fucking parking lot.
I'm not stopping till all Arabs are wiped out.
I think now it's the time that we need to erase Gaza. There is people inside, our people inside, that kidnap, and now we need to kill all of them and free Israel. All of their belief is killing Jewish and killing and murder our people.
Flatten it. Flatten Gaza.
That was video footage from a pro-Israel rally in New York. And, the call to flatten Gaza like a parking lot sounds pretty familiar. I feel like I've heard that before.
As we're going to turn that into a parking lot.
That's right. But, there's no calls for this kind of rhetoric to be condemned. None.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Imagine if roles were reversed for a moment, and an Israeli who just lost their family in a Hamas attack was asked repeatedly, do you condemn that? Do you condemn what these people are saying, completely ignoring the pain and suffering that that person is experiencing and trying to talk about? I think most people can understand that that would be unacceptable, because it is. But the reason why they're able to turn their brains off when it comes to Palestinian suffering is because, again, they don't view Palestinians as human beings. They've been dehumanized, hence the dehumanizing language that we're condemning. Now, my point in showing you all of that is not to resort to whataboutism and imply that one side's genocidal rhetoric is okay because the other side is doing it too. The point is to demonstrate that, again, you're only getting one side of the picture. You're not getting the full story. People who advocate for human rights are portrayed as anti-Semitic cretins who support barbarism against innocent Israeli civilians, when that's not the case. All we are saying is that using one atrocity to justify a genocide and ethnic cleansing against a population of people who had nothing to do with what happened on Saturday is wrong. But nobody's willing to say that. And this dehumanization of Palestinians is reinforced through media again and again. It's reinforced by our politicians. And it's also disseminated by people with very large platforms, like ignorant celebrities. For example, Justin Bieber tweeted out a picture that says, "Pray for Israel," superimposed over a picture of destruction in Gaza. Now, as David Griscom puts it, Palestinians don't even get to own pain in U.S. media. It's simply given away to Israel. And he's exactly right. Jamie Lee Curtis did the same thing. She made a post on Instagram in support of Israel, writing "Terror from the skies" with an Israeli flag, not realizing that this was a picture of Palestinian children being bombed by Israel. And while Noah Schlapp from Stranger Things called for peace for Israelis and Palestinians, he also conflated Palestinians with Hamas, writing on Instagram, "You either stand with Israel or you stand with terrorism. It shouldn't be a difficult choice. Shame on you." Now, if this were an ordinary 18-year-old or 19-year-old, however old he is saying this, I just think, listen, you really need to work on your wording because you worded that in a very clumsy way. It sounds like you're saying that you think Palestinians are terrorists, and I hope that that's not what you mean. But the problem is that this is no ordinary young man. This is somebody with a very large platform. This is a celebrity, and a lot of people follow him. But the problem is that what he's saying isn't going to get much pushback because he's just parroting the mainstream narrative, right? He's effectively putting out this idea that is popular and prevalent that if you don't support Israel unconditionally, if you don't support this far-right fascist government who's overseeing a brutal regime of apartheid who wants to wipe Gazans off the map, then you must support terrorists. It's a binary choice. Support fascism or you support terrorism. There's no nuance allowed. But again, this idea is just something that we see. It's ubiquitous, right? He's just parroting what he sees. So the media has failed here. Now, believe it or not, media has gotten better over the years, but there's still a lot of work to be done, obviously. But as it stands now, the media is likely going to continue to manufacture consent for war crimes and genocide in Gaza by repeatedly showing you exclusively images of brutality from Hamas and never showing you what's happening in Gaza. Now, to be fair, it's very difficult to get accurate information and images from Gaza when they don't have electricity. But if you want to be informed, the information is out there. And listen, you're right to be outraged by the brutality of Hamas. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing or you're a bad person or you don't care about Palestinians if you are hyper concerned about the suffering Israelis because you have family there. You're right to be outraged by that, of course. But remember that Israelis aren't the only people suffering right now. Many people are suffering. Palestinians in Gaza already had no access to clean water. Most of them did not have access to clean drinking water. They struggled to get the medicine that they needed, and now they just lost power, and they're being bombed to death, and people around the world are celebrating their deaths and calling for them to be extinct. So, I mean, all I'm saying here is that if you turn a blind eye to that, then you don't have the moral high ground. So it's really important to understand that as calls for genocide get louder, as politicians and media pundits tacitly and overtly endorse the extinction of Palestinians, understand that these are real human beings and they are not responsible for the actions of Hamas, and treating them that way is completely unacceptable. Innocent civilians, women and children are dying right now, and I think that if you care about human suffering, you should care about them too, because they are human beings, contrary to popular belief.
True King. Preach. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Well, same topic, just the next video. UN urges Israel to stop as they verge on a ground invasion of Gaza.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians?
After cutting off electricity, water, food, and fuel to Gaza,
That guy's crazy.
the Israeli government now appears to be on the verge of invading the open-air prison that they already control the borders of. So, I'm going to break down some of the information coming out of this. I apologize if I am not my usual self. This entire week has been this story. This is the biggest story. We are on the verge of a genocide. There is nothing else that is nearly as important as what is going on right now in Gaza. And it's incredibly depressing. But it's important to get this information out. It's important that people understand the power imbalance at the heart of this issue. When you have Israel backed by the world's biggest superpowers in the US, the UK, Europe, Canada, and they're all backing Israel just continually bombing civilians in Gaza. Yes, Hamas, which is in power in Gaza, is a terrorist organization. Hamas is not 2.2 million people in Gaza. Half of them civilian, or most of them civilians, half of them children. Because again, you can't live long in Gaza. Average age is 18. There's dirty water, not a lot of food, not a lot of medicine, not a lot of help generally. and borders, again, closed off between Israel, and the one border between Egypt and Gaza is often closed off. It's closed off right now and being bombed by Israel. There is no escape for these people while they're being told to get out. Let me get the headline here. From the AP, Israel orders the evacuation of 1.1 million people from the northern part of Gaza. I'll get to more from this piece in a second.
You can't order that many people to evacuate from a fucking place. 1 million people evacuating at once? That's impossible. That's going to clog streets up. That's going to clog those bridges up, choke points. Like, you can't do that. There's no water, no food. How are you going to travel with no food, no water? Hospitals, how are they going to move? You can't do that.
So, for clarity here, Israel wants to expel more Palestinians from their homes and lands in a single day than it did during the entire 1948 Nakba. More than 1.1 million Palestinians live north of the Red Line at Wadi Gaza. Israel wants to relocate all of them to the south of it in 24 hours. Keeping in mind,
you can't.
A lot of the infrastructure is completely gone, roads blocked. Most people don't have cars. Of course, again, fuel's been cut off, even if they had cars. The idea of, I'll give you more context here in a second. So from Omar Badar, Israel is demanding that 1.1 million Palestinian civilians leave their homes in Gaza. For perspective, Israel could displace every human being in Boston and Miami combined, and that would still not reach the scale of displacement they want in the besieged strip with nowhere to go.
Damn.
And again, that's within 24 hours. Imagine trying to do that in Boston and Miami where there is infrastructure, where there are cars. It's just unthinkable what is going on there and what the people in Gaza have to deal with right now. So, as the AP writes, this could signal an impending ground offensive, though the Israeli military has not yet confirmed such an appeal. On Thursday, it said that while it was preparing, a decision has not yet been made. But it appears that is what they're moving toward. The UN has come out strongly against what Israel is planning to do and what they're doing right now with this attempt to push these people out of their homes. Writing here, Gaza, nowhere to go as humanitarian situation reaches lethal low. Going on to write, UN humanitarians expressed deep concern on Friday for all civilians in the Gaza Strip following Israel's order for the entire population there to have to leave the north amid ongoing airstrikes and a deepening humanitarian crisis. And there's a link to all this below the video under sources on YouTube, but so you can go through more of it here. But the UN considers it impossible for such movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences and appeals for the order to be rescinded. And from the UN relief chief here, the noose around the civilian population in Gaza is tightening. How are 1.1 million people supposed to move across a densely populated war zone in less than 24 hours? I shudder to think that what the humanitarian consequences of the evacuation order would be. This is where we get to. This being on not just the Israeli government, but its allies. If the US, the UK, the EU, Canada came out and condemned this,
then they wouldn't do it.
And put some repercussions in place on Israel if they moved forward with this, then Israel at that point would maybe have to act, or in this case, not act and pull back. But from what I have seen, all of these governments are willfully engaged in this, in supporting Israel, in whatever reaction they're having, in the continuous bombing of civilians within Gaza. It shouldn't have to be said, but it's important to be clear about this. Hamas does not equal Palestinians. Palestinians are not Hamas. They are separate. Yes, of course, people in Hamas are Palestinian, but not all Palestinians are Hamas. The vast majority of them, of course, are not. They are civilians living in an open-air prison controlled by Israel. Does Gaza have the ability to cut off electricity, food, water, fuel to Israel? No. That is the power imbalance at the heart of this. The fact that Israel has that power over Gaza is the problem.
Israel's basically punching a baby right now. Hamas is like
Gaza Health Ministry told me it was impossible to evacuate the wounded to the south. There are no extra beds in any hospitals anywhere for people to move to. Most of the wounded are unstable. They'll die en route. All hospitals in Gaza, even after they've been expanded, are full. Israel's president is denying the concept of innocent civilians, just to give you an idea of their mindset here during all of this. So, there's a video of this as well. So maybe I'll show you the video, and then I'll read the quote just to be clear on what the quote is.
We are operating militarily according to rules of international law, period. Unequivocally. It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up, they could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. But we're at war.
So, quote here, it is not true.
No.
This rhetoric about civilians were not aware, were not involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up against that evil regime that took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. I'm going to get to how ridiculous this statement is, in particular when it comes to Gaza and Hamas. But just on its face, you are blaming the civilian population for a group that was put into power in 2006. Half of Palestinians in Gaza are under 18. They did not vote for Hamas. They were not around. And even apart from that, using this same logic means that you would also excuse the actions by Hamas on civilians in Israel, because Israelis should have risen up in a coup d'etat to take over power from Netanyahu as the Israeli government occupies Palestinians.
Right.
Which clearly I'm not excusing. Hamas's actions are not excused. Nope. They should not have attacked civilians, just as Israel should not be attacking civilians in Gaza. You can't on one hand say it's the fault of civilians in Gaza, so we're attacking them all, and then freak out when Hamas attacks civilians in Israel. Because it's the same logic that they're using to attack you. Both are absolutely absurd. And in the case of Hamas specifically, this goes to how, and I covered this a bit in my last video. For years, this is from the times of Israel. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Yep. Now it's blown up in our faces. Netanyahu has propped up Hamas specifically because he does not want to see an independent Palestine. He sees Hamas as a vehicle for the destruction that he wants to cause. To give you more clarity on this, most of the time Israeli policy was to treat the Palestinian Authority, which is a group that wants to see peace, as a burden, and Hamas as an asset. Far-right finance minister in the hardline government and leader of the religious Zionism party said so himself in 2015. According to various reports, Netanyahu made a similar point at a Likud faction meeting in early 2019 when he was quoted as saying that those who oppose a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Gaza, in this case being Hamas, because maintaining the separation between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Here he is saying, support those in power in Gaza, being Hamas. Support them over the Palestinian Authority because the Authority wants to see peace, whereas Hamas is a terrorist organization. And you should support Hamas because of that, because it undercuts their ability to be an independent state. While Netanyahu does not make these kinds of statements publicly or officially, his words are in line with the policy that he implemented. And the coverage I'm seeing, and I said this in my last video as well, the coverage I'm seeing out of Israel is a lot more objective, a lot more critical of Netanyahu than what you're seeing in the US, in the UK, in Canada. Because they understand the power at play here. They understand how Netanyahu helped to bring this upon Israelis. And I don't have, maybe I'll cut this in. There is a polling showing from Israel that the vast majority of Israelis want to see Netanyahu out.
Good.
They want to get him out. Because, again, they see him as the problem. Matt Binder, yesterday during our podcast, he brought up that the best way to contextualize this for Americans is that Netanyahu is essentially the Trump of Israel. So if you are right now supporting the Israeli government and what they're doing, you are supporting the Trump of Israel. Understand how much of a destructive force Netanyahu and his government are. He does, and to be clear as well, the Israeli government does not equal Israelis.
Yep.
Most Israeli people do not support what Netanyahu has been doing and is doing. Mehdi Hassan here tweeting this incredible tweet out. It's been a day and I still can't quite get over the fact that the Israeli military itself proudly published these pictures. So the Israeli Air Force here proudly displaying the destruction they have caused in Gaza, claiming that, we've dropped all these bombs against Hamas targets. This is civilian infrastructure. But maybe some Hamas fighters live in some of these homes? Maybe. But you, in the process, killed children.
Yep.
Because half of people in Gaza are children. In all likelihood, any bomb that hits is going to kill a child. There's also, this is its own story, but
White phosphorus, war crime.
Israel is now using white phosphorus.
War crime.
Which, to be clear on that, white phosphorus, which can be used either for marking, signaling, and obscuring, or as a weapon to set fires that burn people and objects, has a significant incendiary effect that can severely burn people and set structures, fields, and other civilian objects in the vicinity on fire. The use of white phosphorus in Gaza, one of the most densely populated areas in the world, magnifies the risk to civilians and violates the international humanitarian law prohibition on putting civilians at unnecessary risk.
War crime.
And this is from Human Rights Watch. Jewish Voice for Peace, tweeting out here, we can and we must stop this. Never again means never again for anyone. Saying that we call on all people of conscience to stop the imminent genocide of Palestinians. We demand our government work towards de-escalation, that it immediately stop sending weapons to the Israeli military. A future of peace and safety for all, grounded in justice, freedom, and equality for all, is still the only option. And B'Tselem, a human rights organization based in Israel, saying the humanitarian disaster in Gaza must be averted. And they go on to discuss the horrifying war crimes perpetrated by Hamas on Saturday, and then discusses Israel has been bombing Gaza relentlessly and indiscriminately. Thousands of tons of bombs have been dropped, and residents have nowhere to flee. And they go on to discuss that impact. And B'Tselem has been one of the clear voices out of Israel, calling for an end to the occupation of Palestinians.
Good job.
Last thing here, just to show you the mindset of some of the people in power in Israel. This is on Sky News, ex-Israeli PM Naftali Bennett. Let me just play the video.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. if you want to bring them electricity. I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else...
You won't even let them have their own electricity or water. You're not giving them electricity or water, but you won't even let them make their own electricity or you'll bomb it. If they start their own water plant, you'll bomb it. If they do their own electricity, you'll bomb it. So don't give me this, oh, you can give them... No, you'll bomb it. Shut the fuck up.
That's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on...
point.
I want to tell you... No, listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show. And I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped, please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame. We're trying to have a conversation about a very serious situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
Look at the filibustering. Because he knows exactly what their government is doing. He does not want to answer the question because there's no way to answer the question that doesn't make you sound like a psychopath.
Fucking asshole, dude. Alrighty. The next one.
As you know, we've got a situation in which Israel is preparing for a ground offensive going into Gaza. What are your thoughts on the military response that we've seen from Israel this past week?
This man's daughter, I think it was his daughter, was killed. Or was taken. And this guy said himself, he's an Irish, I think he's Irish American maybe. He said himself, like, he feels more sorry for, like, the people in Gaza, and that he's glad that she died because he knows what the government of Israel is going to do to Gaza. And just her being in there, you know what I mean? It's just terrible, man. It's fucking sad.
Elena, I must tell you that I'm not crying for my parents. I'm crying for those who are going to lose their life in this war. We must stop the war.
You just heard from an Israeli man whose parents, Bilha and Yaakov, were killed last week by Hamas. But as you saw, he does not support Israel's war because he knows that that war is going to lead to a lot of innocent people who had nothing to do with his parents' deaths dying as a result, and he just doesn't support that. Now he goes on to say the following.
The war is not the answer. And I beg you, I beg all the viewers and listeners to do everything in your power to put pressure over everyone that is relevant to stop the war immediately, to freeze the situation. In our family, we are not seeking a revenge. Revenge will just lead to more suffering and to more casualties. And even though it's the most horrible day, it was the most horrible loss in lives in Israel since the foundation of the country. I'm afraid that the numbers can be much bigger, an enormous number, and we must do everything to stop the war.
His words are so incredibly important, and I really commend him for saying this. Now, thankfully, he is not the only one speaking out, because a 19-year-old survivor of Hamas's attack echoed the same sentiment when she was interviewed.
אזרחי ישראל, פוליטיקאים, תושבי ישראל, חול, לא אכפת לי מי שומע, תקשיבו לי טוב. איך אני אמורה לקום בבוקר ולדעת ש4.5 קילומטרים מקיבוץ בארי, בעזה, יש אנשים שזה לא נגמר בשבילם. בשבילי זה נגמר אחרי 12 שעות, כי היה לאן להוציא אותי. אני בים המלח. מי שמדבר על נקמה, תתביישו. יש הרבה כאב, זה נכון. אני, אחרי כל מה שעברתי, כל כך הרבה כוחות אני מאבדת בכל פעם שאני שומעת את המילה נקמה.
So for her, she experienced a terrifying event, but then it was over because she was able to evacuate. But in Gaza, the terror continues because there's nowhere to escape, nowhere for them to go. And she goes on later in that clip to condemn Netanyahu, asking how many more people have to die for his ego. So we've heard from two people directly affected by Hamas's attack, but yet despite the trauma and the pain and the anger that they're probably feeling right now, they still haven't lost their humanity, unlike almost every world leader. Now, over the weekend, we've witnessed Israel carry out a genocide in real time with the full support of the American political establishment and the Biden administration. On Thursday, we learned that Israel was giving 1.1 million Gazans just 24 hours to relocate to southern Gaza. And as Gazans tried to flee, like they were instructed to do, Israel bombed convoys transporting civilians, killing 70 and injuring hundreds more. And this disregard for civilians from Israel isn't surprising considering their admitted focus, quote, on damage and not on accuracy, as their military spokesperson put it. And the last estimate that I saw put the Palestinian death toll at 2,670, double that of the death toll from Hamas's attack, with nearly 10,000 injured. Now, the Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that entire bloodlines are being wiped out, with every Gazan being affected in some way, shape, or form. And Rafat Al-Arir, who we heard from last week, announced on Twitter that he's lost 6 relatives since. And he follows up by explaining how terrifying it is to wonder which of your relatives are currently living in agony. And he also alleges that families huddled together have been targeted by the Israeli military. And I just want to pause for a moment, because 50% of Gazans are children. So based on the numbers that we're getting, it's reasonable to assume that around 1,300 of the 2,600 deaths thus far have been children. At least 1,000 have probably died. That is devastating. And with power cut off to hospitals, people not able to get dialysis or the care that they need or have their injuries treated, many who are injured currently might die. But even those who weren't injured are also at risk, because remember, as the Independent's Beltrue reported, water ran out for 2 million Gazans with no humanitarian supplies being allowed in. And as a matter of fact, journalist Alan McLeod reported an Israeli airstrike destroyed a United Nations relief depot in central Gaza, meaning that any medical supplies, food, or bottled water that could have been distributed was destroyed, at least at that center. And the effects of no water quickly set in, with AP reporting that Gazans are drinking so little water that they're only urinating once per day or every other day, with others resorting to drinking wastewater and even salt water, which results in more dehydration. And if you drink wastewater, you could get sick. But thankfully, after receiving pressure from the Biden administration, Israel has reportedly turned water back on to southern Gaza. Now, let me just pause for a moment and remind everyone that collective punishment is a war crime. But the reason why they've tortured Palestinian civilians is largely because other governments are okay with it. The Biden administration has allowed them to do this. So the fact that Biden applied any pressure is genuinely shocking to me, considering his administration's despicable response or lack thereof. White House press spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters that calls for a ceasefire were, quote, repugnant, and also called it disgraceful. And to make matters worse, the State Department sent a memo to diplomats telling them to not call for de-escalation or an end to violence because, of course, that would make Israel look bad, which they don't want to do. Now, unfortunately, this pressure from the Biden administration seems to be working because only a handful of progressives have called for a ceasefire. That includes Tlaib, Carson, Summer Lee, Ramirez, Bowman, Watson Coleman, Jesus Garcia, Jonathan Jackson, AOC, Omar Presley, and Velasquez. And I think it's important to read out their names because this means every other lawmaker in this country, which includes all Republicans and the overwhelming majority of Democrats, are silent. They're silent as a genocide happens before our very eyes. So if your lawmaker isn't on that list, I would highly encourage you to call them and ask them why they have not condemned the indiscriminate killing of Palestinian children who had nothing to do with Hamas's attack. This injured little girl that you're seeing on screen is asking in Arabic why Israel is doing this to them. She's not old enough to understand why any of this is happening, but yet as innocent children like her suffer, politicians turn a blind eye. And I can't stress enough how little I respect the people who spinelessly remain silent. Their silence is deafening, especially when it's needed right now, because we are seeing a genocide. It's a defining moment, and so many American politicians have demonstrated that they just don't care about Palestinians. They don't care about suffering, because they know that if they speak up, it could have negative political ramifications for them. Despicable cowards, all of them. They don't view Palestinians as human beings, or if they do, then they're just too afraid to speak up. It's just gross. And this toxic environment towards Palestinians has culminated in a Chicago landlord stabbing a 6-year-old Palestinian American boy to death and severely injuring his mother. And they were targeted because they're Muslim. Now, Politico...
Fucking some weirdo QAnon loser weirdo just killed a little kid. You know what I mean? This is why you can't dehumanize people, man. You can't, especially nowadays with the fucking internet. You can't.
Reports that the Biden administration has expressed shock and was sickened by the little boy's death. But I have to ask, how is he shocked by this? How is this shocking? We knew that this would be the result. How is Biden, of all people, shocked, though, when his response cultivated this climate? This toxic climate that we're in the same way that Trump emboldened white supremacists in his administration, Biden is emboldening Islamophobes, because in the face of anti-Muslim hysteria comparable to the early post-9/11 days, Biden's administration has made it very clear that Palestinian lives don't matter. He is complicit as Israel's far-right fascist government indiscriminately slaughters Palestinian civilians. But all of a sudden, he's shocked that brutality against Muslims is being committed here at home as well. Why? Why would you be shocked by that? Your administration is communicating to the American people that calling for an end to violence is repugnant. That's what your press secretary said. So when you do that, this is what happens. Blood is on Biden's hands. And there is going to be an ongoing political cost for him. As Mehdi Hassan points out, Biden could lose Michigan if things continue in this way, because there's a huge Muslim population in Michigan. And if they choose to stay home in 2024 because they feel rightfully abandoned by the Biden administration, it could hurt him. Now, Biden may very well be working behind the scenes to ameliorate the situation, to pressure Israel. They were likely going to launch a ground invasion within 24 hours. That time has passed, so perhaps he got them to postpone it, so Gazans can get out of the area where the warfare is going to take place. But what you say publicly during these times is really, really important. And Biden has absolutely not met the moment. And the political fallout is continuing because Jewish activists took to the streets in D.C. near the White House to call for the killings to stop. And on top of that, Biden's speech was disrupted by a Jewish activist who had a very clear message.
Thank you for defending equal rights and dignity of all people. Despite intense opposition and hate-filled rhetoric, even violence besides pictures and movies. You're inspiring. And I want you all, the LGBTQ Americans, to know the Biden-Harris administration has your back. I don't know who's hollering down there.
Now, the irony is that he was speaking at an event for the Human Rights Campaign while completely ignoring the human rights abuses going on in Gaza, not condemning them publicly. Now, you may be thinking that everyone is being too hard on Biden because, he's not the one bombing Gaza. But you have to understand the dynamics at play here. Israel has only been able to maintain their state of apartheid and carry out war crimes specifically because it has U.S. support, which is unconditional. So if a U.S. president demands that they stop, that pressure is immense. If a U.S. president threatens to cut off aid if they don't stop bombing indiscriminately, that pressure makes a huge impact. And Biden has not done that. At this point, they've supported Israel unequivocally, which is why Israel is doing what it's been doing. Israel knows that they don't want to piss off their number one ally. So imagine what Biden could accomplish if he demanded an immediate ceasefire and not banned the word from U.S. diplomats. I mean, the fact that it hasn't happened tells us that he hasn't asked, which is why he's choosing to allow the carnage to continue. That's why people are exerting pressure on Biden, right? Now, he showed how influential he is because they turned back on water to southern Gaza when he asked them to. Now, with that being said, his rhetoric is slowly but surely shifting. In an interview with 60 Minutes, he encouraged Israel to not, quote, occupy Gaza, which is a bit tone deaf considering how long the occupation has been going on. But I mean, the mere inclination that Israel is in any way possibly wrong is a dramatic shift when the bar is this low. It's below the floor. So even that, just saying maybe possibly Israel is in the wrong in some way, shape, or form, that honestly is huge, even if it doesn't seem like it. It's subtle, but it is huge. But obviously it's not enough. But despite complicity from politicians and pro-Israel propaganda from the media, what I am really heartened to see is how people around the world are not buying the bullshit anymore. A lot of people are starting to wake up. As Mint Press journalist Ellen McLeod points out, protests have erupted across the United States, in Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Kansas City, Dearborn, Michigan, Seattle, and also in Europe. Protests have broken out in Madrid, Amsterdam, in central London, where the Palestinian flag may soon be banned, in Paris, defying Macron's ban on pro-Palestinian demonstrations, in Dublin, and also in Berlin, with demonstrators being brutalized by German police. But there's also central Stockholm and Glasgow and Copenhagen. And as much as my faith in humanity has been shaken by the responses we've seen from politicians over the course of the last couple of days, I think that seeing citizens across the world rise up to condemn this genocide in real time, it is something that is very encouraging. And understand that Western governments know that they're in the wrong, which is why they have to suppress free speech in order to defend Israel. But the cat's out of the bag, and everyone can see what's going on. And world leaders are only making themselves look worse as they continue to defend the indefensible. Case in point.
What's the view on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza this morning?
There is no humanitarian crisis because
there isn't.
There is no. Israel is in charge of the safety of the Israelis. Hamas is in charge of the safety of the Palestinians.
We've been showing pictures this morning that would illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you a mother?
Yes.
What would you think if your children would have been executed in front of your eyes? Would you expect your government to think about those Nazis committing those crimes and to say, wait a second, first of all, we need to protect the enemy?
Just because you're killing, let's say you were killing Nazis, right? Let's say you were killing Nazis. You can't then, after killing the Nazi government, you can't go bomb Nazi civilians. You can't do that. You can't just bomb the fucking Berlin civilians just because Hitler was the fucking, you know what I mean, indiscriminately. Like, that's still illegal.
And then to protect my children, your children come as priority to your prime minister.
So do you know that? We have been showing images this morning that illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
So blame Hamas and ask Hamas why they started those atrocities, walking around.
So you acknowledge that there is a humanitarian crisis?
I'm saying there is no. Israel is working.
So what do you think is happening?
What is happening? There is a war in Gaza, a war that Hamas started by committing a horrible massacre on innocent Israelis. The world have seen that. Wait a second.
That are innocent civilians.
Just I want to say and give a little bit of a context. Those people created crimes that are worse than ISIS. When the Americans started this fight of ISIS, together with the coalition forces, over 100,000 civilians got caught in a crossfire. Israel is trying to prevent that. Israel is better than any other army in the world. We are alerting. We are giving them the opportunity to have a shelter. We are doing things that no other Western army did in the past.
Absolutely zero concern whatsoever about Palestinian suffering. And with a straight face, claiming that there's no humanitarian crisis as Israel cuts off water, food, and power, and bombs convoys of Palestinian refugees trying to escape bombs. And it's not like Israel is doing this in secret. They're saying we're cutting off their electricity and their water, but she's saying there's no humanitarian crisis. It's just, it feels like we're being gaslit, and it's not okay. But that response, even though it's hard to watch, it's pretty common, right? Because the go-to method is to just deny. Whenever Israeli war crimes are brought up, you either deny them or you pivot back to Hamas, as she did. It's what former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett did when he was interviewed by Sky News, and they asked, What's going to happen to the babies and incubators if you cut off power, which will affect hospitals? Look at his response.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything.
Program. This is my show, and I am asking the...
Not shame on you.
It's nothing about to address this.
He was genuinely outraged that a reporter dared to ask him about Palestinian civilians. But notice the Freudian slip. I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. And first of all, you've cut off aid, so it's not true that other people can supply them with it.
Yeah.
The Israeli military bombed a UN relief center. Yep. But what he said there was very important. He said he is not going to supply his enemies with food and water. Notice how when he said that statement, he didn't differentiate between Hamas and just regular Palestinians. And it's because all of them are indeed his enemies. That's how he views them. He views them all as guilty for the crimes of Hamas. And if you think that I'm being uncharitable, well, let's listen to what the Israeli president had to say about this very thing.
We are operating militarily according to rules of international law, period. Unequivocally. It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up, they could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. But we're at war. We are at war. We're at war with our...
To see him ask that little girl who we saw earlier crying why she didn't rise up and overthrow Hamas. I mean, I guess it's her fault. I guess she deserves the pain and suffering that she's feeling. It's just outrageous. The logic here is stunning, but it goes to show you that when it comes to Palestinians and Hamas, they think that they're one and the same. They're synonymous. Both their actions and their words indicate this. There's just no thought about the humanity of people who have nothing to do with this, including children, about 1,000 of which have been killed. But at least in an interview with CNN, Israel's ambassador to the UN pretended to be sad about the government's indiscriminate killing of Palestinian civilians. But even though he feigned sadness, he still trotted out the same justification to Jake Tapper, making it seem as if Hamas and Palestinians are one and the same.
Sadly, it's very sad because I really feel sorry for the suffering of the people of Gaza. But we should all remember, they elected Hamas 18 years ago. Hamas is the only one responsible for everything that is happening there.
So in other words, they're all guilty because you get what you vote for. Stunningly dishonest because, again, 50% of the population in Gaza is under 18, meaning that half of them were not alive when the election took place, or they were children and didn't know what was going on. I don't think many children are politically active anywhere in the world. Furthermore, no mention there of Benjamin Netanyahu emboldening and wanting to fund Hamas to thwart Palestinian statehood. No mention of the Israeli government's apartheid regime, keeping Gazans in the world's largest open-air prison, obviously going to foster desperation and inevitably lead to radicalization, but no mention there of that. But regardless, I'm honestly stunned that he even bothered to put on an act for CNN's audience, because usually just straight-up callousness is what we see. It's the norm. Take Israel's foreign minister, for example. So while he was being called out for war crimes in an interview with Mark Lamont Hill, look at the way that he reacts when Mark floats the idea of Israel accepting Gazan refugees themselves so that way they're not punished for the crimes of Hamas.
He said that the humanitarian situation, quote, will only deteriorate exponentially, and that crucial life-saving supplies, including fuel, food, and water, must be allowed into Gaza. So the UN is saying you must do this. You are saying you're not going to do this. How do you?
No, we're not saying that.
He's saying do it. He's saying doing it immediately. What I'm saying is what you're doing.
No.
He's saying doing it immediately.
I got you. I'll tell you exactly what we're saying. I'm saying we will do everything for the Gazan people.
Once and now, we demand immediate surrender, unconditional surrender of Hamas. If Hamas people come out with their hands up and clear their weapons, believe me, everything will be restored to Gaza. It is Hamas in Hamas hands.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that, sir. I think we're actually on the same page here. You're saying that once Hamas leaves, you'll grant the Gazan people food, shelter, fuel, electricity, hospitals, schooling. And if they don't, and if Hamas doesn't leave, then they'll continue to starve and die in hospitals. You are defining for the international community right now collective punishment. You're saying until Hamas acts differently, the 2 million people in Gaza are going to be treated this way. And once Hamas acts differently, these 2 million people in Gaza will be treated better. That is exactly what collective punishment is. You're holding them accountable for the actions of others. That is the definition, the textbook definition of collective punishment, sir. Now, you may accept that that's what you want to do, but this is absolutely a contravention of international law.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. No, if we pushed them into the wall, we're not pushing them to the wall. We want to open a humanitarian corridor so they can leave. But if Hamas,
so that who can leave? Citizens? You're saying civilians can leave, but only through the Rafah border, correct?
At this point, yes.
So they can't
come. Where else?
Your country. They can come into Israel.
I'm telling you one more thing I want to say.
I want you to address that point. Don't just smile, sir, respectfully. You're saying you're making a corridor. They can go to Egypt. You're bombing them. You say you want to save them, but they can't come in.
First of all, I'm not smiling. I'm crying in my...
Unbelievable. He smiled at the idea that Israel dare admit some Gazan refugees. Now, I also have to point out that level of journalistic integrity and pushback is not very common. We almost never see that. And if you're wondering why we don't see that more often, it's because journalists are either ignorant or, more likely, they're scared into complicity. Because before he joined Al Jazeera, Mark Lamont Hill actually worked for CNN before he was fired for condemning Israeli apartheid. Now, this is pretty common. Others have had the same fate, like Jewish journalist Katie Halper, who was fired from The Hill for condemning Israeli apartheid. Even MSNBC, an outlet generally trusted by liberals, has quietly sidelined 3 prominent Muslim hosts, all of which have condemned Israeli apartheid. This includes Ali Velshi, Mehdi Hassan, and Ayman Moyeldin. Now, even though MSNBC vehemently denies that they've silenced their Muslim hosts, we have absolutely no reason to believe them at all, considering their history of silencing hosts who condemn wars. I'm, of course, talking about Phil Donahue. I'm talking about Jesse Ventura. So if you're wondering why reporting on this issue is so bad, why there's so much propaganda, that's why. It's because reporters risk losing everything if they do the bare minimum and condemn apartheid or genocide. And when pundits are bullied into silence and complicity, and journalists also are struggling on the ground to get the news out due to a lack of electricity, well, it's easy for Israel to control the narrative. But even those who are trying to do their best on the ground, they struggle. Because there was one journalist who was reporting, and during his live report, an Israeli police officer got on camera and threatened him, all because he suspected negative coverage.
من المسؤولين الإسرائيليين خلال الأيام الماضية.
ما أنت مدافع؟ رجعني بشدور. بس ما أنت بشدور.
ما أنت مدافع؟
ما أنت مدافع؟ ما מעניין אותי אם אתה בשידור. מדווח מה אומר דובר צה"ל. מה אומר דובר צה"ל? מקווה מאוד שאתם אומרים דברים טובים. הבנת אותי? מקווה מאוד שאתם אומרים דברים טובים וכל החמאס האלה צריכים לשחוט אותם. הבנת אותי? כי אם אתם לא תבלחו את האמת, אוי ואבוי לכם.
الآن لمراسلنا أحمد راوشة خلال مشاركته معنا على الهواء من أسدود. ما الذي كان يقوله لك أحمد؟
عناصر من الشرطة الإسرائيلية يحاولون أو يراقبون ما الذي نتحدث، وخرج مرة واحدة للصراخ بهذه الطريقة وللتهديد بطبيعة الحال.
تهديد جديد للطواقم الصحفية كما نرى على الشاشة. عنصر من الشرطة الإسرائيلية يتدخل أثناء مشاركة زميلنا أحمد راوشة معنا على الهواء من أسدود.
Yeah, just brazen. Now, on top of that, because Al Jazeera, for example, is one of the few outlets with on-the-ground reporting, and they're successful, and they're able to cut through Israel's propaganda, well, there's talks of them getting banned. At least this is what some Israeli cabinet members have floated. But despite censorship and attempts at censorship, ignorance is still no excuse, because on-the-ground reporters are doing a great job, regardless of the circumstances. And even though it's more difficult, many of them are able to broadcast human rights abuses in 4K. And even though it's difficult to watch, I think that it's really important that we don't look away, because we need to understand the gravity of this situation. And I want to show you an example of that. So BBC aired this report from a Gazan reporter, and even though it's disturbing, this needs to be seen, because BBC, they've done some terrible reporting on this issue. Some of their pundits in particular have made very tone-deaf comments, but this right here is very important because you're seeing firsthand what it's like to live in Gaza.
My name is Adnan El-Bursh, a reporter for BBC Arabic and a resident of Gaza. Here in Al-Shifa Hospital, bodies lay everywhere. The injured scream. Hospital. Inside are my friends, my neighbors. This is my community. Today has been one of the most difficult days in my career. I have seen things I can't never unsee. Called Muhammad sits next.
120 people live there.
The corridors of Al-Shifa Hospital are filled with bodies, as the dead were given no dignity and the injured are left in pain. Adnan El-Bursh, BBC News, Gaza.
Just a reminder here, Western governments know that this is happening. Both Democrats and Republicans, they know that this is the reality on the ground. But yet the overwhelming majority of them choose to remain silent. Silent in the face of genocide. The international community, most Western governments also have chosen to remain silent. And in doing so, they've failed Palestinians. I genuinely believe that this is going to be a moment in the future where we look back and we say, how did we let this happen? How were so many Western governments silent?
I agree, and I think it's just because Israel's a giant fucking military base for us. We're just like funding them and giving them all these weapons and shit. I wanted to highlight this moment. This was when during the H Street podcast when they were talking about everything going on. And I just wanted to highlight how
say it.
How everyone's feeling.
So if you see anybody saying that, you know they're liars and bad faith weirdos. So here's what I'll say about Israel. Okay? Listen. This isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs, okay? They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal, okay? He's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis. And they're hellbent on genocide, frankly, overtly. They've committed tons of war crimes in Gaza, including the killing of children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18, so when you bomb a building, the chances that you're killing children is pretty much 100%. Okay? It's fucking barbaric. It's unacceptable. It's disgusting. I've seen videos, I saw videos of Palestinian dads holding his dead 5-year-old daughter. I mean, yeah. And there was another one that
It shouldn't happen on either side. There shouldn't be death. It's really fucked up.
As a father, it's even hard to talk about. This dude was holding his infant. It was a year old.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry. All this stuff's happening.
And he was patting her on the back and saying his final goodbye. I mean, he's holding her like she's alive, like he's just burping her or something.
It's okay, bro. You don't gotta.
I didn't expect to get emotional about that, but I'm a new dad and that shit really fucks me up.
Yeah.
And I hate to see it. It's not right. I think people in Israel that support the government and the government need to watch that shit. I think Israel shutting off water, power, and food to Gaza is insane. It doesn't even make sense. Like, what's the end goal there exactly?
I wanna cut in here for a second, and while you recollect your thoughts and say something. The feel that internally. The opinion of the Israeli population currently doesn't matter. The Western opinion.
I think
matters.
the Israeli opinion on the massacre was pretty unified, dude.
Well, what they say about that is that
Whoa.
they don't.
What
Everybody's
the hell?
already.
Hold on one sec, Hila. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
They're saying everybody is already in such grief and broken that they don't need to show this terrible footage, but
I mean,
they're saying it's important for the world to see what happened, so that's why.
Yeah, they're doing propaganda. It's like, it's
Yeah.
not surprising, is it?
Yeah. No, it's not. But I'm just saying that, like, I think that
I mean,
there
it
is-
did happen.
I think that there is more.
They're not like
It isn't-
putting the bodies there and like putting them in fucked up
no,
ways.
of course
I'm
not.
just saying,
That's not
you
what
know,
I'm
it's-
saying at all.
It's
Come on.
not that cynical to send in the
No,
press.
I think that
It's not cynical at all. In that case,
I think that the coverage from certain Israeli outlets on the matter is more critical on the Netanyahu administration, and showing that, I think, and like the interviews that I've seen as well of the parents fucking demanding, basically kicking out Israeli Knesset members that are visiting the hospitals, yelling at them, telling them to fuck off, telling them that this is their fault. I think that, like, there's two different reasons for obviously that level of anger. Some of which say you did this to us by being more brutal, and that this violence, of course, is going to be a constant, and it's going to be a violent retaliation. And then there's also the people that are saying you are not violent enough, right? But ultimately, everyone is critical of the Israeli government at this point from different angles, and I think that's the reason why they care more about the Western media's opinion than anything else, because they don't want to repeat the mistakes that happened last time in both 2018 and also the Shireen Abu Akleh murder, again in the hands of an Israeli sniper that the Israeli government said was actually Palestinians, and Western media immediately disproved that. And then what did the IDF do? What did the IDF do?
I don't know.
When a wonderful voice for good, a Christian woman, a Christian Palestinian, and an American citizen, Shireen Abu Akleh, was murdered as she was on her way to one of these refugee camps. She had a press vest on. She had a press helmet on. She was shot in the neck so that she could be assassinated. Okay? This was a major issue. They wanted to do. Sorry, this is really fucked up. They went to her funeral and beat the shit out of people and ripped the Palestinian flag off of her. Palestinians can't have a moment of peace in this fucking world. They can't even mourn the dead. Sorry. The IDF went in and beat the shit out of the Palestinians that were mourning her at her funeral, that were holding her casket, and ripped the Palestinian flag off of her casket. How is that allowed? How can that continue? How do you not see that? That's in the West Bank. This is a Christian woman. This is not a Muslim. This is not Hamas. This is a journalist that was beloved in the Muslim world. And she was assassinated for speaking out and trying to shine a light on the atrocities. it's hard to look, it's very hard to hold my composure on this. This is something I've talked about for years and years. But when that kind of ruthlessness, sound like fucking Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, that kind of ruthlessness and racism and like just hatred breeds. It breeds hatred. Hatred breeds hatred. That breeds hatred right there. Let's look up
Israeli police have attacked mourners and pallbearers at the funeral of the Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in Jerusalem. The Al Jazeera reporter was shot in the head while covering a raid by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank on Wednesday. Earlier today, an Israeli officer was shot dead and several Palestinians injured during an army raid to make arrests near Jenin in the West Bank. It follows several weeks of mounting violence with dozens killed on both sides. Our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman reports.
Shireen Abu Akleh was one of the best-known voices to Palestinians. Now in death, a national symbol. But grief for a revered reporter was to turn to fear and panic for the mourners. Israel's security forces had entered the hospital gates
these fucking pigs, bro.
as Palestinians tried to walk the coffin out. The police fired stun grenades and pushed the crowd back.
Whoa.
Many rushed for cover inside.
We've had complete chaos with people trying to get inside. I saw a woman with a very young baby, a patient or somebody who was here just at the hospital, caught in the middle of a huge crowd trying to get inside.
And even the pallbearers had to retreat as police kicked and beat them with batons. And the coffin slips to the ground. The force says it acted to stop what it called incitement and stone throwing.
The IDF doesn't give a fuck about human life.
Shireen Abu Akleh was shot in the head covering an arrest raid by Israel's army. Reporters on the scene say the gunfire came from the soldiers, but Israel maintains Palestinian gunmen may have fired the fatal shot. But for her loved ones, it was time to say a final goodbye. At her Christian funeral mass, eulogies to a life of purpose.
Literal fucking fascists, bro. It's so fucking crazy. I can't believe this is going on, but let me look up real quick. Jewish man settles Palestinian home. Look at this shit, dude. This is what happens when you live in the West Bank or in Gaza. They literally just steal your fucking home. They steal your house. Nothing belongs to you anymore. Because the fucking government in Israel doesn't allow your rights. They don't allow Palestinians to have rights. You've got to drive on the other side of the road when you live over there.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one.
If I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it. Like, what?
Is allowed to steal it, يا عمي. You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is gonna steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, يا عمي. Yaakov, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
Ethnic cleansing, and it's still happening.
Yaakov, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I... It's
You-
easy.
The Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood is home to some 3,000 Palestinians, many of whom are descendants of people who were forced out of what is now Israel during the ethnic cleansing of 1948. Israel has been ordering the eviction of Palestinian families. They will evict who lived in the Sheikh Jarrah for generations. A total of 58 Palestinians, including 17 children, are under threat of being forcibly displaced to make way for Jewish settlers. Palestinians are calling to save Sheikh Jarrah on social media.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is gonna steal it.
Okay. What else should we fucking add to this? Alright, well, let's finish Pierce Morgan. Let's watch this quick bit.
The 7th, which is the word. Now, to discuss the conflict in Israel and Gaza, the TV happened on October the 7th.
Oh, it was terrible, of course. I mean, we kind of get our news kind of also secondhand because, you know, my wife's family, they live in Gaza. They have cousins and uncles there, and their house also was bombed. We haven't been able to communicate with them for the past 3 days. Communication are lost.
That's so fucked up.
we don't know actually what is the how are they doing, but you know we're used to that. I mean, it's just like it's very repetitive. We're used to that. We're used to them being bombed every time and moving from one place to the other. You know, it's just like those Palestinians. They're very dramatic. Israel killing us. But they never die. I mean, they always come back. You know, they're very difficult to kill, very difficult people to kill. I know because I'm married to one. I tried many times, couldn't kill her.
I mean, there's a dark humor there, and I understand why. Because
no, it's not dark humor. I try to get to her every time, but she uses our kids as human shields. I can never take her out.
Again, I understand the humor, but to be serious, Bassem, about this. Tonight,
I will be serious. Now, I will be serious. I was watching your interview with Ben Shapiro, and I'll tell you one thing.
Yeah.
I think that Ben Shapiro is one of the smartest people who ever walked this earth. He's very, very smart. I follow him, and I believe everything he said. And when he came on your show, his solution was, and I quote, his solution was that the solution for this is for Israel to annex Gaza and to kill as many son of bitches as possible to make sure that this will never happen again. And anyone who called for a ceasefire will be a terrorist sympathizer. So God forbid, I don't want to be labeled as a terrorist sympathizer. So I agree with Ben Shapiro. I think we should kill as many son of bitches as possible.
Well, let me,
so
okay,
far,
but Bassem, let me...
so far, 3,500 people were killed, including 5,000 son of bitches in the bombing of the Baptist hospital as we speak right now. 1/3 of those 3,500 were children. So my question to Ben Shapiro is, how many more son of bitches do we need to kill so Ben Shapiro is happy?
Okay,
because it changes
Bassem,
from 1 year.
It changes from one.
I'm sorry that Listen. I'm really at a disadvantage here. I'm looking at a camera. I don't see you. I can hear you on my
The
ears.
reason I'm interrupting
so
is
give
I think
me a
you
little
might
bit
be.
of a space.
I think you're conflating different interviews with Ben Shapiro. He didn't use the phrase "sons of bitches" with me. Let me play to you what he actually said on my show.
He did. Go back to your interview.
No, he didn't. That was another interview. But let me play what he said to me here.
Well, frankly, I don't believe in proportionate response to terrorism. I believe that the way that you stop terrorism is with wildly disproportionate response. That doesn't mean in terms of targeting civilians. It means in terms of killing as many terrorists as humanly possible and allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement by hiding behind civilians in areas that they are supposedly responsible for means that the only option for Israel is to surrender to Hamas's hatred of its own citizens, its willingness to use its own children as human shields. No country worth its salt could ever do that.
Now, that is substantively different to what you said he said, right? He's talking there
but
specifically about Hamas terrorists.
I agree with him. The thing is, the question is, what is a proportionate response? Because it has been different from one tier to another. So if you look to this graph, for example, this is the death of Israeli and Palestinians, and it's changed from 1 year.
Look, on this side, it's all Palestinians, thousands, hundreds, thousands. Over here is Israel. 5 people, 10 people, maybe 50.
To year, it's like fluctuating like crypto. So my question is today, what is the going rate today for human?
And down here, this is the most recent attack. I got 1,300 people got killed, but on the Palestinian side, they always lose like 1,000 people. So it's like they're literally just massacring
lives. I mean, 2014 was a great year for Ben Shapiro. 88 Israelis were died, and there was 2,329 Palestinians killed on the other side. That is one Israeli for 27 Palestinians. That is a very good exchange rate. What I'm saying is, what is the exchange rate for today? You guys will be happy. That's my question.
Well, it's not me. It's not me, guys. I'm not on either side.
No, not you. Like when I say you guys, I say like the people on the other side of that. I know that you don't think like that, Piers. You're one of the good guys. But let me tell you something. I mean, the reason that I'm using this is that, I mean, I can't remember what happened in 2014, and there was no music festival, but there must be something. I mean, they must do something. It is their fault. It has to be something. I mean, 2018, 300 Palestinians died. Who's counting, you know? So the thing is, what my question is, let's find what is the exchange rate for human life today so we expect the future death of Palestinians and we'll be happy to it.
My response to that would be this, Bassem. I've thought carefully about this because I think it's very tricky for people like me to immerse ourselves into a conflict where we're not directly involved. And I thought carefully about what I feel about.
This is why, like, Piers Morgan is such a fucking propagandist, because he's gonna keep trying to bring up Hamas. It's a bad guy. Israel has the right to defend itself, and this man is trying to say that Israel has disproportionate power. Israel is like Superman punching a fucking baby in the face. It's destroying the whole like fucking Gaza. It's leveling Gaza to the ground, and they're using Hamas as an excuse. Hamas is bad, but that doesn't mean you can target civilians.
About this, I feel that the scale of what Hamas did on October the 7th
here you go
supersedes anything else I've seen in this conflict, really ever.
So he's saying that what Hamas did surpasses the airstrikes that Israel's doing, the bombings of hospitals, the colonization of the West Bank, the Hamas attacks worse than all of that combined. Wow.
The savagery, the butchery, the slaughter of 1,300 people, the shooting of babies, the 100%. Kidnapping of grandmothers, and so on. So if we can agree on that, which I think is inarguable, then the question then becomes, again, about proportion. I don't disagree that there's been a lot of bad stuff on both sides going back historically for decades. But if we agree that this was on a different level altogether, quite deliberately by Hamas, designed to provoke... No, here's my question. Let me ask you a question. And the question, because you raised it earlier about proportion. I honestly don't know what the proportionate response is. I honestly don't. I don't. I've been watching the airstrikes this week thinking...
So what's your question?
Well, I would ask you, if you were Israel, what would you...
If I was Israel?
If you were Israel and that had happened to you, what would you think would be the appropriate way for the country to respond?
Nuke.
I would do exactly like Israel did, kill as many people as possible, since the world is letting me do it. I mean, I can do it because I can, you know. But the thing is, you know what? I agree with you. And you know what? I'm going to be even ahead of you, because I see the question coming. Do you condemn Hamas for the atrocity? Yes, I condemn Hamas. I condemn Hamas. I condemn Hamas is the source of all evil. They're a reason for everything. And you know what? Let's, for a minute, imagine a world without Hamas.
Right.
What will this word look like? Let's give this word a name, and let's name this word the West Bank. Hamas has absolutely no control in the West Bank, and since the beginning of this year, only through August, 37 Palestinian kids were killed.
They're still killing Palestinians.
No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. Since the occupation of the West Bank, 7,000 Palestinians were killed. No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. I can go on and on and on and on.
No, but you don't need to, because in a way you're preaching to the choir. I've followed this crisis.
Oh no, you're not preaching. So the thing is, like,
in the sense that I know that what you're saying has validity. Of course,
Piers. By the way, Piers. I am at a disadvantage here. I can hear you. I cannot see you. I am in a claustrophobic room, and so please cut me some slack and don't interrupt me and interrupt my points.
Sure.
So, because this has to be fair.
Understand.
Because if you want to only hear your opinion, I can just condemn Hamas and go home. I can do that. So, do you want to do that, or do you have a much more nuanced conversation?
No, I absolutely want to have a nuanced conversation. I wasn't aware I was interrupting you. I thought I was letting you speak.
Amazing. So I would say I really applaud Israel for doing one thing that no military force in the world does. Because I heard Ben Shapiro and I heard Ron DeSantis, and they said Israel is the only military force in the world that warns civilians before bombing them. I mean, how fucking cute. That is so nice of them. Because with this logic, if Russian troops started warning Ukrainians before bombing their houses, we're cool with Putin, right?
You're right.
I mean, okay, Habibi, you have warned them, go invade. It's fine. You have done your job. I mean, the thing is, and I understand, and I also heard Ben Shapiro talking about Human Shield. So you remember my wife's family, they live in Gaza. So I asked them, I told them, when Israel give you the nice warning, the cute warning, does Hamas force you to stay in your home so you can be bombed and use as Human Shield? You know what, Hassan here, my wife's cousin, he's a loser, you know. He told me, you know, when I asked him, does that happen? He told me, no. The lying son of a bitch lied to me. I told him, you don't understand. Ben Shapiro and Ron DeSantis keep saying that Israel warned you and Hamas asked you to stay put. So I told you, he's a loser. He never kept a job. He even failed in all of the interviews to become like a Human Shield. I would believe Ben Shapiro.
Let me ask you this,
So let's go with that. No. Let me ask you
At some point, I must be able to ask you questions. It's not a monologue for you, Bassem.
If we agree that for the 14,000 casualties, I mean, who's counting, are Human Shield, does that mean that every single one of those civilians was standing, obscuring a military target behind them? No. Because that's a lot of weapons. I mean, Hamas is packing.
No, of course it doesn't. And look,
it doesn't. So there's some collateral damage. Lots of collateral damage.
Yes.
It's fine, yeah. You kill some to save some and then kill some more. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Again, it comes back to proportionate response. When the world decided it had to get rid of ISIS because of the appalling butchery they were carrying out, it did so by also killing, very sadly, a lot of civilians along the way by doing airstrikes against places which
but killing civilians are inevitable. You said that in the beginning.
My point is,
it's inevitable.
Yeah, but once Israel has decided that they want to get rid of Hamas, and Hamas is embedded with civilian population, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen next. I've written a column tonight saying, I remember the Iraq War, which I opposed, right? I remember all this. So my question for you is, what would you think would be an appropriate response by Israel to what happened?
Well, these are years of disproportionate responses of Israel.
Yeah, literally. Look at that, dude.
Did it solve the solution? Did it solve the problem? Did it work before, so it will work? What?
Exactly. We've been through all the bombing already. Gaza's reduced to rubble. Did it stop Hamas? Is Hamas gone? No. Hamas is still here. So what the fuck is attacking Gaza again gonna do?
What will be the surprise this time? What will be the twist that will make this work this time? What? What will be different this time? Seriously, I mean, like, this is only the last 15 years. I mean, because it's too many papers. I just got this. But how will this be different? And the thing is, I am so glad in the introduction that you mentioned the Iraq war. I applaud you, Piers, for saying that, because you were honest about it. You said that spreading lies like WMDs make people look at those people as less of humans, and they would accept the death of 1 million Iraqi, whether by sanctions or by invasion, right? You are a good man. This is amazing. And you know what is similar? Is when you spread the lies of 40 decapitated babies, although it was refuted. So what happens when people hear that, killing babies is horrible. But
yeah, check this out. So let's find Piers Morgan talking about the decapitated babies. Can we find the decapitated babies bit? It might be in might be in Rational National, maybe. Yes.
I mean, 2014 was a great year for
just bring up. Where's the decapitated babies bit? Oh, right here, right here.
Choked up earlier reading this new revelation about 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded. And I was like, how can any human being do that to a baby?
I don't know. I don't know. It's totally barbaric. It's not the sort of thing a human being does.
No.
It's an
So they're not humans. And he didn't mention babies.
You are a good man. This is amazing. And you know what is similar? Is when you spread the lies of 40 decapitated babies, although it was refuted. So what happens when people hear that, killing babies is horrible. But when you say decapitated 40 babies, you are planting a certain image
Well, who has
with a
said
certain
that?
trigger in people's mind.
Who has said that? Who has said 40
Who has said that?
Who has said that?
40 decapitated?
Who has said
you
that?
You have repeated.
No, I haven't.
What?
I've never said that.
You haven't said on your show 40 decapitated
No.
babies?
Never.
Ben Shapiro didn't say it?
No.
Ron DeSantis didn't say it?
Nobody has said
Okay,
No, they
nobody
haven't.
said it?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I am wrong. Decapitated. Here's
you're
the
wrong.
thing.
I've never said
the
that.
thing, what happened, no, you're wrong. But the thing is, the same thing is happening in Iraq. Ben Shapiro once tweeted, not even about Gaza, about the West Bank, when Israel continued to build the illegal settlement. He said, 2017, Israel likes to build things, and Arabs, not Palestine, not Hamas, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
Yeah, I thought that was very
the Israeli defense minister, he said, those are human animals. And the thing is, Ben Shapiro should know better, because, long before the Holocaust, before Jewish people were thrown in the gas chambers, the Nazi propaganda called them rats. Now, as a human being, I will never accept that another human being being thrown into a gas chamber, but a rat, kill 10, kill 1,000, 3,500. They are son of a bitch. They are human animals who live in open sewage and decapitate babies. And because of that propaganda, Mr. Morgan, that guy in Illinois, the 71-years-old guy, he killed, stabbing the 6-year-old Palestinian kid in Illinois 26 times. And he used to play with him. They used to be friends. But he went in, marching into their apartment, stabbing his mother and killing him, shouting, all Muslims could die.
Yeah.
It took you 80 years to change one word from Jewish to Muslim. And then you transferred your guilt to us and took away our land.
Bassem, let me ask you a question.
That deal sucks, man.
Let me ask you a
Yeah.
question. How do we get from where we are now to peace?
Well, first of all, you need to change the perception. Nikki Haley, the American presidential candidate, said, we are in Israel in this because it's a fight between good and evil. Now, if you already decided someone is good, he can do no evil. And if you decide that someone is evil, it's good to kill them. Killing them is good. You see, and the thing is, it is not like something new. I mean, I look at history and I see, I'm sorry to say this, but Westerners has always dealt like this with indigenous people. You first treated them like savages, you know, Native American, First Nation, Aboriginal. They're savages. Kill all the savages. And then when they're almost extinct, you start feeling sorry for them, you know, like animals. So maybe the solution is that we kill as many Palestinians as possible so the few of them that remains do not bother you. And maybe Netanyahu, when he lives for another 100 years, he'll become a tree hugger.
Let me just challenge you on this.
And he will campaign for preserving the free Palestinian.
You keep talking about Westerners like me. Okay, so let me return the favor, okay? Hamas is dedicated to the complete eradication of Jewish people.
I am not the spokesman for Hamas.
I'm not saying you are.
Why do you keep...
I'm not saying you are.
Their spokesman.
You're talking to me.
I fucking hate them. Fuck Hamas. Hamas. Are you happy?
You're missing my point. You're talking in a generalized way about people in the West who always talk about Arabs as savages. I don't.
No. I'm talking about America.
I actually led the campaign. I led the media campaign
listen,
in this country against the Iraq War. Okay, so I don't see.
I
don't see people in the Middle East as savages.
You are one of the good ones.
But what I would say is,
I'm talking about you. You're great.
No, it's not about me being
amazing.
great.
We love you.
It's about the way Hamas behaved on October the 7th was like savages. Like a pack of savages. It was the worst atrocity against Jewish people since the Holocaust. There has to be,
of course,
there has to be a response. And my
they
question
should be eradicated.
Hamas is not in West Bank, and in West Bank, Palestinians are being killed, their properties being taken away, their homes are being stolen. It is not about Hamas.
Question for you is, notwithstanding the history, Bassem, what is the proportionate response?
But I don't know. But there's no Hamas in the West Bank, and they're still dying there. So what's your excuse?
I don't have any excuse.
Okay, what's your explanation? Sorry, my earpiece went down.
Listen, I don't make any pretense that this hasn't been a massive problem.
Okay,
between Palestine and Israel going back to the mid-40s. We all know this, right?
Piers, listen. I'm not saying that you're making excuses, but if you are adopting a certain point of view, you have to at least defend it. I'm telling you, there is no Hamas in the West Bank. What is the excuse? Not your excuse. What is the excuse to kill those people?
Well, listen, this question of proportionality is one that...
No, answer my question. I've been answering your question. You answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. It's not.
Okay, not your job.
Not.
I agree with you.
I'm more interested in you, who has family in Gaza, who's an Egyptian in the Middle East, right? I'm more interested in what you have to say.
Okay, I'm telling you. I think Hamas is the problem, okay?
Right.
Now, let's say Hamas is removed. Let's Hamas, I'm agreeing with everything. You want me to condemn Hamas? I will condemn Hamas, Hummus, Hassan, everyone. Guys, so wait. I can't hear you. The earpiece... Damn, okay. Oops. Okay. Yeah, okay. I do need help.
I think just go back. Is he there?
You go back.
Can you hear
back? Okay, go. Thank you, guys.
Can you hear Bassem?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Can you hear? Okay, so Isaac, let's say, for example, Hamas ceased to exist. Okay? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Hamas ceased to exist today. Now, right now, in Palestine, in West Bank and Gaza, 20% of Palestinians go through Israeli prison system, whether imprisonment, whether interrogation, whether torture. And the rest of them, they live a life of daily loss of land, of homes, of life, and they are suffocated by this. So let me ask you something. If you are a Palestinian living into these conditions for decades, would you would you sympathize with your oppressor or sympathize with the people who claim they resist them even if they are terrorists?
I have made no secret that I think the conditions Palestinians have had to exist under are completely unacceptable. I've said that for years. So the question then becomes, how do you forge peace between two warring parts of that region who for decades have approached peace, in my view, with...
Bro, he told you. He said stop stealing their land. Stop killing the people of West Bank and Gaza for no reason. Go after Hamas with precision, not just willy-nilly bombing. He told you.
Mutual sledgehammers with no actual desire to have peace. And I think it comes down in the end to great leadership. And I don't think there's great leadership. I don't think, well, hang on, let me make my point. I don't think there's great leadership on either side. Where is the Nelson Mandela figure here to come through all this hatred on both sides?
Nelson Mandela?
Yeah, where is that
Nelson
figure?
Nelson Mandela actually have criticized Israel for being a horrible state. All of the South African activists have actually
my point
called
is,
Israel.
my point is
yes.
about how he responded to a country that was so divided. Is a template for how you get to peace, isn't it?
I haven't met Nelson Mandela, so I wouldn't know. But like there's a point. There's a very important point here. You know, I want to understand what is the logic of Israel carpet bombing Gaza. I mean, if there's a logic, if this will make Israel safe, I want to hear the logic. So if they continue bombing, what are they hoping to achieve?
Well, I think we know what their stated aim is. Their stated aim is to eradicate and wipe out Hamas. They believe Hamas are living predominantly in northern Gaza. They also are aware they're living amongst civilians. So it's an incredibly difficult thing. As I said in my monologue, you know, it is very, very difficult to see how they do this without massive collateral damage.
So if I can understand this correctly, basically Israel is doing this to pressure the Palestinian community in Gaza.
So it's an incredibly difficult thing. As I said in my monologue, you know, it is very, very difficult to see how they do this without massive collateral damage.
So if I can understand this correctly, basically Israel is doing this to pressure the Palestinian community in Gaza to turn against Hamas. Is that right?
I'm sure that's part of it, yes.
That's part of it. So this is exactly what terrorist organizations do, because terrorist organizations will have no chance beating a whole nation in battle. So they terrorize and they kill the civilians in order to spread fear and terror so they can turn against their government to change their policy or...
And that's why Hamas killed all those fucking people in that music festival. Terrorists go after the weakest link in their enemy. You know what I mean? They're not gonna attack every fucking IDF outpost. They're going to go for the weakest people, and those are the citizens. And that's why Hamas, you know what I mean? Like, of course.
Or to resign. You have just compared Israel with ISIS.
No, I haven't. I don't see any comparison between
It's going to be the headlines tomorrow. Piers Morgan, Israel is ISIS.
Only amongst people who weren't listening. The comparison, which is more apposite, is ISIS and Hamas. They are both nihilistic terror groups intent on killing as many Jewish people and others as they can possibly kill. And you can't get peace with people like that.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm going to do something that nobody done on your television. You know what I'm going to do on your episode? I'm going to pretend that I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm going to put myself in the place of an Israeli settler in the kibbutz. And I want to speak to my Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, I have voted for you because you have promised us peace and prosperity and security. On the 7th of October, those son of bitches Hamas, they went into the fence that is regularly heavily guarded. Usually if there's like a dove that comes close to it, it will be shot. Those people went in and they went for 6 hours before IDF forces was deployed, killing our friends, our families, kidnapping our grandmothers and babies, and went in. I want to ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, after you have fractured the Israeli community and you have fucked our courts, our Supreme Courts? What are you doing with the money being given to you, to the United States? Also, you are carpet bombing Gaza with absolutely no regard to our hostages, our people. I heard a rumor in the kibbutz that you're doing that you let that happen as an excuse to carpet bomb Gaza, so you push them into Sinai. And I didn't believe it. It's like, not my prime minister. He can never do that. And then I watched an interview for Danny Ayalon. He was your chief advisor. He was also the Israeli ambassador to the United States. And you know what he said, Mr. Prime Minister? He said that the solution for those Palestinians is to go into a vast land of Sinai and live into tent cities temporarily, temporarily, wink wink, until we build Gaza again, and then we invite you back. يعني عبط احنا بقى. يعني فاهمني؟ We've seen this movie before. So يعني, and when I saw this, I couldn't explain to my fellows in the kibbutz, how come our Israeli government is trading human lives for another piece of land? So as an Israeli citizen, I need to hold my Israeli government accountable. And as an American citizen, I want to know all of these money that we are giving to Israel. We're giving them $4 billion every year. Joe Biden said it's the best investment America ever done. Well, if I am in the place of Joe Biden, I would say, sorry, don't speak. I would say, if I was Joe Biden, I would go down and whisper in the ears of Netanyahu and tell them, I hate bad investments. They haunt me, like Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. But the thing is, this is the problem. Israel always victimizes itself, and I have never seen a victim putting their oppressor under siege and bombing them 24/7. Israel wants you to believe that they are the victim. Dealing with Israel is so difficult. It's like being in a relationship with a narcissistic psychopath. He fucks you up, and then he makes you think it's your fault.
All right,
you look at Israel as Superman, but they're really Homelander. Wallahi, they are shooting fish in a barrel, and they are annoyed with the splashes.
Bassem, I want to say two things. One, if you could just slightly mind your language. We are uncensored, but if you keep swearing,
I'm very sorry.
We have to apologise to viewers who may be offended by that.
I apologize.
But I understand passions run high, so let's not get too bogged down about the odd.
Bro, this dude's lit. Bassem Youssef, bro. What an awesome ass. Fucking awesome, bro. But yeah, they're literally. Okay. So look, let's look at a map of Gaza. Gaza map. Bro. Right here is the Sinai Desert. They're trying to take Gaza, push them down, take this, push them into the fucking desert. Look at this. Gaza's right here. Gaza, Israel's here. Jordan, Saudi Arabia. And then Egypt is right. It's all of this. Egypt is big as fuck. Damn. So this is both Egypt? Wow. But yeah, they're just trying to push them into the desert, guys. The Sinai Desert. This is it. A vast land of cyanide. That's so fucked up. But let's watch this clip now. This is how the Palestinian people live.
I'm always sick. I don't know.
They literally live in fucking destitution. It's so depressing.
I'm always sick. I don't know. I can't do anything. See all of this. What do you expect me to do? Fix it? I'm only 10. I can't even do anything this morning. I just want to be a doctor or anything to help my people, but I can't. I'm just a kid. I don't even know what to do. I get scared, but not really that much. I do anything for my people, but I don't know what to do. I'm just 10. I'm just 10.
Their houses were wiped out. And then,
All of this, when I see it, I literally cry every day.
and they need to live on their
Saying
own.
to
you know what
myself,
I mean?
why do we deserve this?
And
Why,
this
what did
shit
we do to this?
is gonna push people towards Hamas.
My family said they just
When
hate
you do
us.
this
They
to
just
people,
don't like
it's gonna
us
push
because
them
we are
towards
Muslims.
terrorism. When
Why
they have
does
nothing
Muslim
to live for,
act for you like
they don't
that?
have clean water, food, nothing to live for.
You see all of the kids around me? They're just kids.
It's gonna
Why
push
would
them
you
to
just
fucking
send a
terrorism,
missile to
you
them and
fucking
kill them?
disgusting Israeli
It's not
government.
fair.
It's fucking disgusting, dude. I
Not
swear
fair.
to God. I swear to God, I can't even believe that this is happening. I literally can't believe that this is happening. And our government's standing behind it because he doesn't want to lose a fucking election. Which I agree, you know, Trump is a fascist, but Jesus Christ, what's going on with the world nowadays, dude? What is going on? I don't get it. I really don't know what's going on. It's really sad. Let's look at some more footage of how people live in Palestine.
This is what I experienced minutes after setting foot in my family's hometown.
We literally just got here. We went through the first military checkpoint, and a bunch of soldiers stopped us, started yelling at us.
I'm in the old city of Hebron in the occupied West Bank, a place that once bustled with life. But I'm about to see what Israel's occupation and settlers have done to the heart of this city and to the people who live here. I'm a Palestinian American journalist, and I've spent much of my career reporting on the occupied territories. But Hebron, one of the West Bank's largest cities, is also my roots. My father was born and raised here. I've returned to learn how the occupation has decimated his beloved hometown, a place he hasn't been back to in years.
I had a mixed feeling, nostalgia with anger, despair over despair. What can I say?
I know it's really hard for him to see this, and so it's emotional for me.
So we're officially on our way to Hebron. My team and I are going to Hebron's Old City, which is ground zero of Israeli apartheid. Today, 33,000 Palestinians live in this part of Hebron, which is under full Israeli military control and fragmented by checkpoints, military outposts, and around 1,000 Israeli settlers who live here in violation of international law.
اللي حصل في البلدة القديمة في مدينة الخليل هي كارثة بندفع ثمنها كل يوم.
حياتكم هون صعبة؟
هي صعبة ومستحيل وحدة تقعد محل تجرب تقعد أسبوع.
إحنا عايشين هون بس باعتبار السجن.
But before we get into all of that, let me back up. It wasn't always like this. This is my dad. He was born in Hebron in 1947. He lived up the hill from the old city where his father and uncle owned a quarry. The year after my dad was born, Israel was established in what Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, or catastrophe. That's because hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from their homes to clear the way for the creation of a Jewish state. But the West Bank, including Hebron, fell under the control of Jordan. My dad was 19 in June of 1967 when Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights and began a military occupation that still has no end in sight. My dad was in college in Jordan at that time, so he wasn't in Hebron to witness that or to see how Jewish settlers took over parts of the old city. A few years later, he moved to the U.S. for graduate school. I was born and raised in San Francisco and grew up hearing my dad reminisce about his childhood, like how he raised chickens and rabbits on the hill as he watched the vibrant city below. When my family would travel to Palestine in the summers, my dad couldn't come because of work. Now, even though he's retired, he says he doesn't want to return because he refuses to be humiliated by Israeli soldiers. He's only been back to Hebron 3 times. But I'm returning to see with my own eyes what has become of this city that made my father and me who we are today. And that all begins with me actually getting there. It's only about 20 miles from Ramallah where we're starting out, but we can't, as Palestinians, access parts of the main north-south highway because that's reserved exclusively for cars with Israeli license plates. So here's another checkpoint. Instead, we have to take narrower roads and cross through several Israeli military checkpoints. Here's another checkpoint.
that means it takes much, much longer to get there. We're finally in Hebron. I'm sure my dad knows these streets inside and out, and he used to walk all over here as a child, so this is literally retracing his footsteps, but it's very different now than when he grew up.
Today, many parts of the city are off limits to Palestinians.
All right, gonna go through.
Because I'm Palestinian, I'm not allowed to enter parts of the old city. So I'm meeting former Israeli soldiers who, I hope, will help me access my family's hometown.
Hi, how are you, Ori? Nice to meet you, I'm Dina.
Ori and Joel are with the Israeli anti-occupation group Breaking the Silence. They used to serve in the Israeli army, but now they give tours of Hebron to expose the reality of how Israel treats Palestinians.
Come here.
But before they could even start showing me around, this happened.
היא אזרחית ארצות הברית ועיתונאית, כן? רק שתדעו. היא אזרחית ארצות הברית ועיתונאית.
אין שום בעיה, הוא צילם עמדה ביטחונית, הוא צריך למחוק את הסרטונים האלה.
אני לא צילמתי את העמדה, צילמתי רק אותך.
לא, צילמת את עמדה. זה לא משנה, אם היא עמדה ליד העמדה, אתה מוחק...
דבר ראשון, אתה מפריע לנו בעבודה, בוא תעמוד שם עם המצלמה. דבר ראשון.
עכשיו דוחף אותי.
יופי, דוחף אותו, כרגע הוא מפריע לי בעבודה.
My Palestinian film crew, who have the proper credentials, are sadly used to experiencing this kind of nationalistic harassment and taunting.
So I've been in the old city for about 5 minutes, and we were already stopped by... We literally just got here, and a bunch of soldiers stopped us, started yelling at us, started harassing my cameraman. They just asked to see our IDs. I showed my US passport. To all of a sudden have like 6 or 7 armed Israeli soldiers just swarm you, it's honestly really upsetting that this is how you get welcomed to your own home city.
The former soldiers I'm spending the day with say this is a typical...
Welcome to your own home city. Soldiers just swarm you. It's honestly really upsetting that this is how you...
See a little smirk he did?
You get welcomed to your own home city.
Fucking asshole. Just because they got fucking guns. Bitch ass. Oh, let me see.
Man, all of you guys with your bitch ass. bunch of bitch ass culeros.
The former soldiers I'm spending the day with say this is a typical scene.
When you consider the fact that they grew up in Israeli society, they have education and media and a political system, all of those elements are telling them that Arabs are scary, Palestinians are bad. And then they get an opportunity when they're in the army, they have power in their hands, and it's not surprising that they use it.
Finally, the soldiers give us back our IDs.
Let's continue, right? It's a very classic demonstration of one of the elements of the occupation, which is complete arbitrariness, right? And every soldier in the occupied territories has the authority on his own decision to detain anyone for 3 hours. Yeah? So we were not delayed here for 3 hours, and we are going to continue our tour, obviously, but it's an example.
But what a way to start the day.
I'm about to learn that what I just experienced is nothing compared to what the Palestinians who live here go through every day. This is Fadl, who has lived in this home his whole life. In the 1980s, Israel set up this checkpoint in front of his house. Fadl now has to check in every time he leaves or enters his own home.
كيف بيضايقوا عليكم؟
زي ما انت شايفه بخلوش قرايبنا يجوا علينا.
خطرة.
يعني بنتي متجوزه مين مسموح لها تيجي جوزها لا.
واو، وهلا لما بتمرق ايش لازم تفرجيه؟
اسمه ورقم هويتي.
وانت بتقدر تمشي هون مش ممنوع؟
بس لحديتي.
واو.
هون ممنوع.
Fadl isn't alone. Thousands of other Palestinians in Hebron are also forced to pass military checkpoints just to go home. The military also bans Palestinians from using certain streets, as Ori shows me.
On that street over there, Palestinians are allowed to walk and open businesses, but not allowed to drive. The yellow street on the map is a street where Palestinians are only allowed to walk, not allowed to drive, and not allowed to open businesses. The streets that we're heading towards are mostly sterile, meaning that no Palestinian in the whole wide world can walk on those streets. If you do one step over here, no Palestinians are allowed here. If we take one step here, here Palestinians are allowed. And I don't know any other word to call this than apartheid.
All these restrictions help Israel maintain its hold on Hebron, but they're also in place to protect Israeli settlers. And the ones in Hebron are known for being among the most violent in all of the occupied West Bank.
Our order in Hebron is protect the Jewish settlers, right? We don't have an order protect Palestinians if settlers harass them.
The soldiers never protect the Palestinians.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not in our order.
This is kind of a common sight here in the Old City. There's a Palestinian family that lives at the end of this alleyway. Above them is an Israeli settlement, and because the settlers throw garbage down at them, they have to put these nets here to protect them.
يعني هون لما اجوا يعتقلوني هون بالضبط يعتقلوني.
كنتي هون بالضبط؟
كنت بالضبط هون. لما اجوا يعتقلوني بالضبط هون كنت.
The family at the end of the alley is the Sidrs. Just a few weeks before I arrived to Hebron, nearby settlers accused their 13-year-old daughter Selwa of picking a knife up off the ground.
فقد كل جبت معيش ولا سكينة أنا.
אבל שלא מלך. הכל זה אני עכשיו לוקח. איתי אצלי. יאללה תביא הזיכרון. تبي تكون ممنوع.
اعتقلوني واخذوني يعني على مدرسة أسامة وقعدوا يحققوا معي. قعدت ساعة لما حققوا معي. لما فلتوني قعدت ساعة لما فلتوني يعني كثير ساعات لما فلتوني وحققوا معي.
بتخافي يعتقلوكي كمان مرة؟
أنا حسيت إنه وأنا نايمة حسيت إنه بدهم يعتقلوني بنص الليل.
So we're standing here and I'm talking to her in front of her home, and every time we hear a noise she looks up, and I asked her, are you afraid the settlers are throwing something down at you? And she said, yeah, لأنه بصير كتير إنه بيرموا عليكم.
كتير بصير. يعني إذا شفناهم بيلعبوا خلاص بدهم يرمونا بدهم يعملونا يرموا علينا حجر وإحنا بنقعد نتفرج عليهم يعني.
أولاد المستوطنين.
طبعا أولاد المستوطنين. يعني أخي صار يحكي لي إياه يطلع محل ألعابهم.
حرام.
كيف بيلعبوا وإحنا نفسنا خلينا ننزل عندهم نلعب قلت له كيف ننزل هذا احتلال. كمان إحنا ما بنقدرش يعني ننزل من مرة من هون 24 ساعة في الدار يعني زي باعتبار السجن.
Just talking to her, it's really you don't feel safe at all. Like it's not a life that people should or can accept.
So how did Hebron end up feeling like a prison for its people? After the Israeli occupation began in 1967, Hebron was among the first places Jewish settlements were built. This illegal land grab captured international attention.
Now there's pressure for large-scale Jewish resettlement. And to some people, this looks very much like colonization.
Some settlers said they were coming to Hebron because of its sacred place in Judaism, as the burial site of Prophet Abraham and his family. Others said they moved there in response to a massacre of Jews that happened in 1929. That's when rising tensions over European Jewish immigration aimed at turning Palestine into a Jewish state led to violence. More than 60 Jews were killed, and homes and synagogues were destroyed in the ancient city. But even after the settlers moved in, Hebron's streets weren't segregated. Then, in 1994, everything changed. An American-Israeli settler armed with an assault rifle entered the Ibrahimi Mosque during Ramadan and killed 29 Palestinians.
Palestinian fury as the victims of the mosque massacre are rushed to hospital in Hebron. Doctors say most were shot in the back as they knelt to pray.
The shooter was ultimately overpowered by survivors and killed. But today, many Israelis in nearby settlements continue to honor him. In response to this massacre and the unrest that followed, Israel punished the victims, closing off roads and choking the economic lifeblood of this Palestinian city.
You know, we're just seeing so many empty houses, empty storefronts, Israeli flags everywhere, soldiers stationed everywhere checking us.
Since the crackdown, over 1,500 Palestinian-owned shops have closed for good, and more than 1,000 Palestinian families have moved away from Hebron city center.
They have decimated the old city Israel has. And it's really unfortunate to see. I mean, this should be a thriving, bustling marketplace right now, and it's completely empty.
Look at these empty homes, used to be the prime real estate in the West Bank. Here,
she's harassing a Palestinian right now, just because
so
he's sweeping.
What we
He's sweeping.
can just see here, the Palestinians cleaned the street. They just tried to clean around the military post to do their job. Yeah, because this is still a street where Palestinians are allowed to walk. And this settler woman told them that they shouldn't enter. They shouldn't enter there. They cannot enter this, even though it's a military post.
Please don't touch our camera. That's wild. The settler woman got mad at the Palestinian for sweeping the street, and then she attacked us and our cameras and tried to block us from filming.
Many of Hebron's settlers moved here from the United States. Sadio came from Brooklyn a few years ago.
Does it bother you that you're living somewhere so heavily militarized where Palestinians that have been here for generations are getting kicked out of their houses and can't walk on certain streets?
So I'll ignore the use of the term Palestinian since there is no such nation or people. It doesn't bother me at all. Militarization is a thing happening all across the world. I'm not up to anything and nobody's invading my space for no reason. I don't care.
يعني أكثر من مرة الأولاد الصغار كان عندي تومي بوقفين نزل المستوطن كان دا يدبهم على تحت.
يحملهم ويدبهم؟
والله كان دا يحملهم على تحت.
كيف بيعاملوك المستوطنين اللي عايشين هون؟
وأنا معاملتهم يعني من مرة مش بني آدمين يعني بعدوا بتفوا بضربوا البنت بتخاف تنزل المرة بتخاف تنزل.
أنا قبل كم من يوم أخوي بحجر صوان هون انتفخ كمان.
مين رمى الحجر؟
المستوطن.
So why do you give these tours?
It's extremely important to show people what the occupation looks like, because this word is very vague for most people, right? Occupation. And when you see here, when you walk on those segregated streets, you cannot ignore the reality. And I believe that it's my responsibility as someone who took part in it. The minimum that I can do is to try and show people what I was sent to do. I believe that any decent human being who will see this will want this to end.
So we're gonna attempt to enter Shuhada Street right now. No Palestinians are allowed to be on that street, only Israelis and foreigners. I'm gonna enter on my US passport. Of course, I'm originally Palestinian, so we'll see how that goes.
While all of Hebron's old city has been affected by the occupation, the most striking example might be Shuhada Street. It used to be the city's most important, vibrant thoroughfare. My dad went to middle school on this road, and his family owned shops here. But in the years following the 1994 massacre, Palestinians have been banned from walking on this street, even if they live on it.
So the Israeli military welded these Palestinian doors shut.
See? This is welding. We actually welded shut their doors. We send Israeli soldiers to weld shut those front doors of these families while everyone else who is not a Palestinian can walk freely.
This video shows what it takes for one Palestinian woman to leave her home. She climbs her roof and scales back down to the ground to exit on a back street where she is allowed to be.
But if you're a Jewish settler, you can walk out in front of your front door. Yeah.
Look at us, not only if you're a Jewish settler. Everyone who is not a Palestinian.
إمتى آخر مرة مشيتي على شارع شهداء؟ يمكن من 25 سنة.
25 سنة، يعني كل يوم تطلعي عليه وممنوع.
كل يوم بطلع عليه، أما هو مشيت كان تبنا بدنا نروح مثلا هاي الكارنتينا بدنا نطعم الأولاد، أمشي هذه المسافة كلياتها على الكارنتينا، كانت كلها فاتحة المحلات وسوق الخضرة والسيارات، هات ما في حدا.
This is the old central bus station in Hebron, and they've turned it into a new military base that's under construction there, and behind it is a new settlement.
Over here, we can walk and have a look on the old jewelry market. This whole thing is a settlement.
This is how absolutely devastated it is right now. Settlers came and just ravaged the whole place and destroyed it.
This is the old fruit and vegetable market. It was here, and now what does the sign say, Ori?
Now this is a settlement.
The old city has suffered. Everywhere you look, there's just deserted shops, deserted homes, destruction, broken windows. And in the middle of it all, there's like schools and settlements and Israeli settlers just living their lives with the full protection of the military.
You know, one thing that's really striking being here is how incredibly silent it is. The only sound you hear is the flutter of these little Israeli flags above. I keep thinking about how, you know, I directly descend from here. Not only is it like sad on just a human level, but there's a very personal element to this street as well. I don't blame my dad for not wanting to come back because it's that messed up. So I'm trying to piece together exactly where my dad grew up. You know, I've pieced together that that's where my family's home is. And the view is of a bunch of Israeli flags and a military outpost on the hill over there. And in between them, the cemetery where my grandparents are buried and the home that my father grew up in. So, man, I wonder if he's awake right now. I should FaceTime him. Hi, Baba.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon.
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
I want to show you. I think this is where you grew up. Is this?
This is Shuhada Street. Yes.
Yeah, this is Shuhada. There's nobody here except for some soldiers and a few settlers. It's a total ghost town.
During the days, you see the people in the market, and at night, I could see the singing and the dancing. It was like the heart of the city. Sad, so sad.
It's so sad.
Well, I had a mixed feeling, nostalgia with anger.
This is the old vegetable market. Does this look familiar to you?
Exactly. I used to go sometimes in the morning in the summer to buy cactus pear. This is despair over despair. What can I say?
How does it make you feel showing your dad?
I don't know. I feel really sad. Like, he grew up right there. You know, his parents are buried right there. And I know it's really hard for him to see this. And so it's emotional for me.
My dad wanted to talk to Ori.
Hello, my friend.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm glad you are for peace. When counting on people like you to expose the lie.
I really hope you can be here and visit your childhood home at some point. Really, really hope.
You know what I do? I just keep looking at the pictures over and over and over again. I am physically in San Francisco, but spiritually and emotionally always in Hebron.
I'm curious, how did you feel watching me talk to my dad and then speaking to him yourself?
Like sad, responsible, that this is what the place that I grew up in, that I was so proud of when I was a child. This is what we're actually doing to people. And it feels horrible to feel that.
What most haunts you and your conscience about what you did in your time as a soldier?
For me, it's the routine way we control the Palestinians, right? A Palestinian can wake up in the morning and not know if he will be at work on time, go to sleep, not know if soldiers will invade his home. We basically control the most simple and basic elements of life.
It's designed to break down the population of Palestinians and show them who's in charge and humiliate them on a daily basis.
Exactly. How can we make 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank to feel that they cannot lift their head up? We will make them understand that we control their lives. The segregated roads and the settlements and so forth, they exist all around the occupied territories. Military activity, home invasions, patrols, digital surveillance, they exist here and they exist all over the West Bank. The difference in Hebron is that in a very short walk, we can see examples of all of it.
All of it.
All of
we
it.
saw all of it.
It was a heavy day, but before it ended, I wanted to visit my father's childhood home. As I stood on the roof overlooking the old city, I thought about how the landscape today is completely different from the one he looked out at when he stood in this same spot. And I couldn't stop thinking about everyone I met and the price they're paying for remaining.
رغم ذلك انت ضايل هون.
طبعا دارنا بيتنا هون. وين اروح؟
بس في غيرك سافر وهاجروا.
في اللي معه مصاري بيطلع، احنا على باب الله. الحمد لله.
عمرك فكرتي ترحلي من هون؟ لا. ليه؟ ما هو كل مشاكلي معاهم عشان ارحل من هون. ملايين دفعوا لي. اخر مره زهقوا وحطوا لي شك مفتوح. ما قبلت.
وانت مش راضيه؟
وانا مش راضيه.
ليش مش راضيه؟
ما خلص، ما هو اذا هذه راحت شو بده يضل؟ اذا اخذوا البيت شو بده يضل؟
لسه عمرك تخافي ولا عمرك عينك تخافي. انا بحب بنتي تكون قويه قد حالها.
انا قد حالي وقويه.
يا لما اجى اعتقل بنتي اعطاني درس الاحتلال. اعطاني اياه اذا انت ضابط اسرائيلي بتتعامل مع البنت هيك. شو بدك يكون بيني وبينك السلام؟ انا بدي اقول لك شغله واحده، اذا انا مش حامي حالي يعني انا ماشي هون انا مش حامي حالي كيف بدي احمي اولادي انا
It's hard to shake the idea that this Palestinian father could have been my dad. I could have been Selwa. This could have been my life.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video from El Khalil here in Hebron. Let me know in the comments what surprised you most.
What else do we got? Oh yeah, one more topic, and then I'm gonna cut it because I'm fucking tired. Israel hospital airstrike. So Jesus. A hospital was hit by an airstrike 2 days ago, and that's the big topic of news. I mean, by now it might be not a big topic, but it was a few days ago. And basically this is how it looked like. It's fucking crazy. And people are trying to figure out if it's Israel or Hamas. I think it's Israel because this just looks way too powerful. Way too powerful. Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah! But look, as long as they get investigators on the ground and everything, and they check everything through, and they can make sure that it's not, you know, that it wasn't Israel or it wasn't Hamas or either. I mean, it don't fucking matter. We need to stop. This war needs to stop. And I don't think there would have ever been a Hamas if it weren't for Israel funding and not helping the Palestinian Authority. So it's all Israel's fault. One more time. It's like a fucking nuke. Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah! But yeah, that was it basically. Here it is. Hundreds killed, or at least 500. That's what he said. That's what the Palestinian hospital people said, 500. But it might be a little less than that. But we don't know. Gaza Strip, a massive blast. Rocket Gaza Hospital. At least 500 killed. Ministry said. And then Israel basically came out and said, oh, it was actually it was Hamas. And then they said, oh, it was the Israeli Jihad. My bad. It was the something Jihad force or whatever. And it's like, and then they came out with some weird like audio evidence that didn't really match anything, and it was just really sus. I don't know. We should wait till more evidence out. But we need to stop this. This is fucking insane. And I think Biden should like literally just hold all the funds from Israel. Fuck Israel. The government. I love the people. I love every person. All people are great. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the show though. I'm gonna keep watching this Hamas tunnels shit. But I hope you guys have a great day. A great night. It's 2 in the morning right now, 3. Can we all just get together and have fun, and can we all just chill out, please? Let's just chill out. Come on, guys. We need peace in the world.